In a flash, everything changed when I heard my husband's angry voice on the phone. He yelled, "Why do you always fall apart when I need you?" He didn't seem to care that I was in the hospital because our baby was in danger. He complained about being hungry and waiting for my cooking while I was stuck in the hospital. He said he'd had enough and was going out to eat with his parents, leaving me to figure out how to get home on my own. His anger made me feel even worse, especially because I was scared for our unborn baby and worried that I couldn't protect them. I used to be a dedicated cosmetic salesperson known for my hard work and success. I had many awards and loved my job. Meeting my husband felt like a dream come true, and our relationship quickly turned into marriage. When I found out I was pregnant, I had to make a tough choice. Leave my job to avoid the risk of miscarriage, thinking about what was best for our family's future. As my pregnancy progressed, my husband's support seemed to disappear. What used to be excitement turned into frustration. Simple tasks became overwhelming for me, and I struggled to meet his expectations. He would ask, "Where's my lunch?" and then criticize the simple sandwiches I made, saying I couldn't handle smells. He dismissed my difficulties with, "Pregnancy is not an illness," making me feel alone in my struggles. This was so different from the man I had fallen in love with. He stopped coming to doctor's visits and showed less concern for the household chores that were becoming too much for me. Our home, once filled with love and respect, felt like a constant battle as I tried to protect both myself and our baby. I hoped that we'd eventually find our way back to understanding each other. Maybe he's just tired and stressed from mentoring a new person at work. I kept telling myself that once the baby is here, his busy schedule will ease up and we'll settle into a good routine as a family. I reassured myself, whispering "okay," while gently touching my growing belly, trying to stay positive despite the challenges with my changing body and our strained relationship. Things between my husband and me haven't improved. On top of that, my in-laws have started showing up unannounced, which has added to my stress. They criticize the cleanliness of our home and worry about how we'll manage with the baby, but they still expect me to serve them food right away. I feel overwhelmed and unprepared, and their visits always end with disappointment. My husband never stands up for me and seems to agree with their criticisms, making me feel like I'm not good enough. One day, while heavily pregnant and sent out to buy groceries, I collapsed from exhaustion. I woke up in the hospital, having passed out from overdoing it, but thankfully, our baby was fine. The doctor said I needed to rest for a few days. I saw missed calls from my husband and thought he must have been worried. But when I called him back, instead of relief or concern, he greeted me with anger. "Where have you been?" he demanded harshly, as if my health and our baby's safety didn't matter to him. His cold words made me shiver. I tried to explain, "I'm sorry I collapsed at the store and had to come to the hospital. They have me on IV fluids and want me to stay here for a few days." But his response was unfeeling and impatient. "You collapse and I'm supposed to care. Why don't you answer when I call?" "You're so slow," he said, making me feel even worse. I couldn't stand the thought of our baby being exposed to this negativity. I pleaded, "Please stop yelling. It's not good for the baby," but he ignored me. He continued, "We're starving here waiting for your awful cooking, and you're just relaxing in the hospital." It was clear he wanted to go out to eat with his parents and leave me on my own, even though I was in this condition. His anger and lack of concern were overwhelming. I ended the call, feeling completely alone and heartbroken. As I returned to my hospital room, tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. In that vulnerable moment, a familiar and comforting voice reached out to me. "Are you okay?" I looked up to see Helen, a customer I had grown close to from my days as a cosmetic salesperson, offering me a towel. Seeing her brought me immense relief and warmth. "Helen, it's really you. I'm so glad you remember me." Our unexpected reunion felt like a beacon of kindness and human connection during my darkest hour. Helen was more than just a customer to me. After a tough divorce, she had lost her confidence and stopped wearing makeup altogether. I remember approaching her at the cosmetics counter and offering to help her try some makeup. The change in her wasn't just physical. It was a boost to her self-esteem and a step toward emotional healing. Over time, Helen became a friend, not just a client. But then, 5 years before I left my job, Helen stopped coming in, and I often wondered what had happened to her. Now here she was, providing support when I needed it the most. "I had been hoping to reconnect with you, Helen," I said. "I was surprised to find out you had left your old job when I went looking for you." "I'm sorry for just showing up out of the blue," she replied. "I had been working abroad. I run a business overseas, and it's been very busy. I hadn't had a chance to enjoy summer or good food in ages. So once things settled down, I decided to come back. And believe it or not, right after, I tried to find you," Helen said with a laugh that made the situation a little lighter. "I ended up here with appendicitis. It's just in the early stages, so medication should handle it. If this had happened while I was still abroad, the treatment cost would have been sky high, so in a way, I'm glad it happened here." Her optimism and warm smile were contagious, and this surprise reunion cheered me up. We happily reminisced about old times. As our conversation went on, Helen, with her kind smile, gently asked, "You don't have to share if you're not comfortable, but I noticed you seemed upset earlier. What's going on?" Feeling I could trust Helen, not just as a former customer but as a real friend, I opened up about my troubles with my husband and in-laws. "I'm really worried about bringing my baby into this environment. I'm afraid they'll be treated the same way I am. And without my job, the thought of living independently, especially with a child, feels overwhelming." To my surprise, Helen made a truly generous offer. "I actually have an apartment you could use. I manage a few properties as part of a project I started with land I inherited. It's a cozy 2-bedroom with a separate bathroom, soundproof walls, and it's in a safe neighborhood close to supermarkets and a police station. You wouldn't need to pay a deposit right now, and you can start paying rent whenever you're ready. It's a really good deal. What do you think?" Helen's excitement and sincerity were so genuine that I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. "Are you sure you can offer it at such great terms?" I asked, overwhelmed by her kindness. "Absolutely," Helen said. "I trust you'll take good care of the place, and I think it's important to support each other in tough times. You're more than welcome to stay there," she assured me with a warm smile. Helen's unexpected kindness felt like a ray of hope. It wasn't just an offer of a place to stay, but a chance for a fresh start. Her generous gesture was something I couldn't refuse, so with heartfelt gratitude, I accepted. Days later, once the doctors gave me the all-clear, I left the hospital and moved straight into the apartment Helen had set up for me. She had arranged everything effortlessly over the phone, showing incredible generosity. I didn't go back to the home I shared with my husband. Instead, I embraced this fresh start in Helen's cozy and welcoming apartment. Although I felt a bit guilty about not paying rent right away, Helen just laughed it off, telling me not to worry. While my husband was at work, I went back to our old home to pick up my things. It felt strange and empty, much like how I felt inside. Helen's support went beyond just offering the apartment. She connected me with a lawyer who had helped her before, and this solidified my decision to pursue a divorce. The lawyer's encouragement gave me hope, and with each hospital visit confirming the health of my baby, my resolve grew stronger. One day, as I left the hospital, I was alarmed to see my husband waiting for me. I panicked and tried to leave quickly, but my pregnancy made it hard to move fast. He confronted me about the lawyer and our living situation, gripping my arm tightly. I stood my ground, insisting that any discussions about the divorce, compensation, or child support should be handled through the lawyer. I refused to return home with him. As he tried to force me to go back, a young woman stepped in to help. Rebecca, as she introduced herself, immediately stood in front of me, showing clear protection. Her familiar interaction with my husband George revealed the underlying tension. Rebecca firmly told George he couldn't take me against my will, and even threatened to call the police. Her determination and the mention of the police were enough to shift the situation, giving me a glimmer of hope and the strength to assert myself. Seeing Rebecca's seriousness, George looked frightened and quickly left. I felt a wave of relief that nearly made my legs buckle. Rebecca immediately came to my side to support me. "Are you okay?" she asked, and I apologized, feeling overwhelmed by relief. Rebecca quickly called a taxi for me, insisting on making sure I got home safely. Despite feeling bad for causing her trouble, she reassured me it was no problem. When I told her my address, she was surprised to learn that I lived just below her. It was a happy coincidence that we were neighbors. Rebecca, cheerful and kind, turned out to be a new employee at George's workplace. She had reported his inappropriate behavior, which led to him being removed as her mentor. George was known for his lack of empathy toward female employees, often making insensitive comments about personal issues like menstruation and marriage. Rebecca shared that George's behavior wasn't just a problem at work. I had experienced it firsthand during my pregnancy. 3 weeks after meeting Rebecca, we had become good friends, enjoying dinners together. She shared that George had been moved to a subsidiary company after multiple complaints and problems at work. Interestingly, Rebecca was Helen's daughter, the same Helen who owned the apartment I was staying in. George had previously bragged about handling Helen's account, but his poor behavior led to his demotion. Helen had pushed for George's transfer after learning about his actions both at work and toward me. Rebecca, determined to address workplace issues on her own merit, had only acted after realizing my connection to her mother. Helen had encouraged Rebecca to gather and present evidence against George, which led to his transfer. With George's reduced income and increased workload, his position had changed significantly. Helen, drawing on her experience, advised me to stay firm and not be swayed by George's attempts to gain sympathy, which was incredibly reassuring. After I decided to divorce George, he tried to contact me through the lawyer, expressing how tough work was and how much he missed me. He even apologized and asked me to come back, but I remained resolute in my decision to divorce, supported by Helen. George had no choice but to accept the divorce and agree to the terms for child support and damages. As time went on, I faced a new challenge with my in-laws, especially my father-in-law, who was overly excited about the baby being a boy. I sensed trouble brewing, and it wasn't long before my in-laws made their move. One day, while I was heading out, my father-in-law grabbed my arm. He had followed Rebecca, thinking he would confront her, but then saw me and demanded that I give up my baby once born, claiming the baby was the family's heir. Despite my efforts to free myself, his grip was too strong. Just then, Rebecca's firm voice demanded he let me go. In a swift motion, she used a judo technique to throw him. Rebecca, a top-ranked judoka with national titles, had mastered judo to protect herself and her mother during difficult times. She confronted my father-in-law, criticizing him for ignoring George's actions and trying to interfere in my life. She defended my right to start over and made it clear that their meddling was unacceptable. The sound of approaching sirens revealed that Rebecca had called for help before coming to my rescue. My mother-in-law, who had been waiting in a nearby car, watched quietly as the police arrived and took both her and my father-in-law away. My father-in-law was arrested, and after some reflection, my mother-in-law decided to divorce him and start a new life in the countryside. George tried to persuade his mother to let him come with her, saying he was fed up with his job and the family drama, but she firmly rejected him. Through the lawyer, my mother-in-law sent her apologies and left some money as a gesture of goodwill. Helen explained that it's common for people to feel lost after leaving a marriage and that the money was likely her way of apologizing and supporting my son's future. I was surprised by her support, given her past behavior, but grateful for her attempt to make amends. After finalizing the divorce, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. My mother-in-law chose to live in the countryside, preferring solitude over staying with George. When my father-in-law was released from custody, he found that the house had been demolished by my mother-in-law before she left. He ended up moving in with George, which only led to more problems and eventually caused George to resign from his job due to a damaged reputation. Despite the upheaval, child support payments continued to come in reliably, likely managed by Helen and the lawyer. Rebecca was recognized at work for her efforts and became a project leader, earning admiration from her colleagues. Helen's projects, including women-only properties and housing for foreigners, were thriving. As for me, once my son was old enough, I planned to return to work. Helen had offered me a position at a new high-end cosmetics store she was opening. She continued to support me and showed affection for my son, as if he were her own grandchild. Rebecca also made time to visit us. Both of them reminded me of the strength and kindness that had carried me through the toughest times. I was determined to be as strong and protective of my son as these incredible women had been for me.
I am Emily, a 33-year-old office worker who tragically lost my parents in a car accident at the tender age of 8. Initially, my 5-year-old brother, Ethan, and I were taken in by our paternal grandparents. Despite their desperate efforts to raise us, the task proved challenging in their retirement years. 3 years later, I found a new home with my aunt and uncle, who became my adopted parents. The transition was nerve-wracking as I moved away from my grandparents, but my aunt and uncle welcomed me with open arms, treating me as their own. Let's slowly become a real family for us." "You are already our daughter," my uncle reassured me, bringing a sense of relief. Although my new home was a 30-minute train ride away from my grandparents, I cherished the hope of visiting my brother when I got older. Being adopted into a family brought unique challenges, but I came to understand that blood relation and a parent-child relationship are not synonymous. Over time and shared experiences, I realized that a mother isn't only someone who gives birth. It's the bonds formed through love and patience. As I navigated through life with my aunt and uncle, I learned that family goes beyond blood ties. While I only shared the truth with close friends, they were surprised to discover that we weren't blood related. A friend's mom once commended my well-adjusted upbringing, but I attributed it to the remarkable love and patience of my adoptive parents. Initially, I struggled to fully open up and was even rebellious at times. Yet, my aunt and uncle faced and accepted me with unwavering patience. Now, as an adult, I find myself wanting to give back to them. With gratitude in my heart, I joined my uncle's company, worked diligently, and have now become a supervisor, a small way of expressing my appreciation to the two people I truly consider as my parents. I maintained regular contact with my brother once we both acquired cell phones. Our communication primarily consisted of texts and calls, and I would occasionally visit him. However, after high school, our meetings became less frequent, and he would only respond to my sporadic texts. It's a common occurrence for siblings of different genders to drift apart as they age. Despite the growing distance, my brother thrived in our grandparents' house, remaining kind. Although he may have felt moments of loneliness without parents, he never caused significant worry and matured over time. Eventually, he graduated from college and secured a position in a well-known company, a source of immense pride for our grandparents and me. This year, on his 30th birthday, my brother reached out unexpectedly, expressing his desire for me to meet the woman he was marrying. While I felt a bit upstaged, the news of his impending marriage brought genuine joy. Regretfully, our grandparents, who passed away in the last 2 to 3 years, couldn't be present to celebrate. A few days later, my brother brought his fiancée, Samantha, to our house, where my aunt, uncle, and I reside. "Let me introduce you. This is Samantha, my fiancée," he proudly announced. Reflecting on our journey from losing our parents at a young age to being eventually separated, he expressed warmth in his eyes. Witnessing my brother's happy face made me feel almost maternal towards him. As he introduced Samantha, I greeted her warmly. "I'm his sister, Emily. Thank you for coming today." I couldn't help but express my happiness at seeing my little brother all grown up. My aunt and uncle also welcomed Samantha with smiles and warm greetings. "Congratulations on your engagement. I'm glad to meet Samantha too," I added. Samantha responded briskly with a smile, expressing her gratitude for the warm reception. "No, it's only natural for us to come and greet you." "I also wanted to have a chat with my future sister-in-law," she said, initiating a friendly conversation. I had envisioned her as a sheltered young lady, being the daughter of a company president. However, she appeared quite capable. Ethan, being a gentle and easygoing type, perhaps complemented her well. That day, as we all introduced ourselves and chatted over cake, my aunt and uncle included, she looked directly at me with determined eyes. Amidst various questions about my single status, plans for marriage, and life as the adopted child of the family, she seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, her future sister-in-law. As we exchanged contact information before parting, she later reached out, suggesting we meet at a cafe. It felt like the beginning of gaining a sister, a somewhat ticklish feeling. However, my cheerful mood took an abrupt turn as we sat down for coffee. Ethan's fiancée expressed a desire to talk with me alone. Anticipating a discussion about my brother, I reassured her that I was open to any complaints or hard-to-say things. To my surprise, that wasn't her concern. With a sigh, she gazed intently at me and said, "I have a favor to ask before we get married." Her choice of words made me apprehensive. "So, you're the adopted child of that couple and single, right?" I confirmed, taken aback by her sudden question. Then she dropped a bombshell. Ethan is practically a stranger to you now, right? Please don't involve yourself with us after we get married. We won't invite you to the wedding since you're a stranger. Stunned, I blurted out my surprise. Wait, just wait a minute. What is she talking about? I might be a stranger legally to my brother, but we are real siblings. I have no intention of meddling in your married life. But I do want to attend and celebrate your wedding. I've heard that no family is free of problems between daughters-in-law, mothers-in-law, or sisters-in-law. Is she trying to preemptively ward off any potential issues with me, her future sister-in-law? But I have no intention of interfering in my brother's marital life. I gently reassured her that there was no need to be so wary, but she shook her head at my words and spoke again. Please don't misunderstand. I'm saying you're a stranger to us, family yet considered strangers. I couldn't comprehend what she was saying and tilted my head in confusion. Ethan and you have been strangers for a long time, right? You're still unmarried and living with those elderly folks, not even on your own. Being an adopted child and single. It would be troubling if you were to rely on us in the future, she declared firmly, delivering such cold words for the sister of her future spouse. Taken aback, I responded, but she continued without concern. It's out of the question for you to rely on us after they pass away. They're still healthy, so please don't say such things. Besides, I have my own job and income. For now, if you were unemployed, I wouldn't have even come to greet you. She interrupted me, glaring. Anyway, we won't invite you to the wedding, and you don't need to invite us to any of your family events either. Just because you're single, don't expect any future support or care from us. I felt a wave of confusion and questioned what she thought of me. Sure, I'm single now, but I have a job and savings. Considering a family member of her future spouse in such a way made me feel dizzy. I tried to express my understanding, but not even being notified about family events seemed too extreme. I understand how you feel, but not even notifying about family events seems too much. I don't think Ethan would agree. Just because we've seen less of each other as adults doesn't mean our family bond is gone, I responded firmly. Well, minimal involvement is unavoidable, I guess, but please gradually distance yourself, she said so nonchalantly, making me feel sad. I'm asking for the sake of our happy marriage. If you refuse, it might complicate our marriage. Remember, it was Ethan who wanted to marry. Think about his happiness, okay? She implied that if I didn't accept this, she might not marry Ethan. It sounded more like a unilateral ultimatum than a request. The proud smile Ethan had just days ago came to mind. While the conditions seemed unreasonable, I didn't want to interfere with my brother's marriage. Faced with her irrational demands, I was left speechless. That night, when I told my aunt and uncle about the day's events, they both found it hard to believe. Understandably so, as she seemed so pleasant when we talked the other day. I was equally shocked. Initially, I thought she didn't want a sister-in-law meddling, but it went beyond that. She insisted that we were strangers and wouldn't hear otherwise. Concerned, my uncle asked, "What will you do?" I replied, "I don't want to ruin Ethan's wedding. I'm not happy about it, but I'll skip it. Once things settle, I'll meet with Ethan alone to celebrate." I see, but if Emily is treated like that, we have no desire to attend either. My aunt nodded in agreement. Seems like the problem is on that young lady's side, isn't it? My uncle said, puzzled, and my uncle nodded with a slight smile. Then came the wedding day with a clear and blue sky. I shouldn't have been there to witness my dear brother's special day up close, but it couldn't be helped. My cell phone rang, displaying Samantha's name. I had saved her number affectionately, thinking she'd become my sister-in-law, but now she was a stranger. Feeling no obligation to answer the call, I switched to silent mode, but the calls persisted, like a persistent demon. My aunt and uncle chuckled, guessing who was calling. I wondered what kind of face Samantha, who had bluntly told me I was a stranger, was making. The calls finally stopped, but my phone's call history was filled with Samantha's name. I chuckled at the thought of her being a stalker. There were voicemails, but I didn't feel like listening to them. That afternoon, as my aunt, uncle, and I enjoyed our favorite donuts, the intercom rang insistently. When I went to the door, Samantha, Athan's fiancée, burst in furiously. "Why aren't you answering your phone? Do you know how many times I called? Aren't you supposed to be getting married today?" she exclaimed. I calmly responded, "What do you want at a stranger's house? It's your fault the wedding's ruined." Samantha was taken aback. "Excuse me?" I smiled back unfazed. "You didn't let your uncle and aunt attend because you weren't invited." "I haven't done anything. I just didn't go to the wedding, as you told me." "That's right, you told me not to come to the wedding because I'm a stranger. Why should I answer a stranger's call?" I continued. Samantha questioned, "So, why are you here?" I replied, "Well, because your uncle here is the president of the Electrical Industry Association." And someone started saying he wasn't there. Suddenly, Ethan appeared with Samantha. "Ethan, sorry. I thought she ran off without listening to me. But she really came here." "Sorry, Emily. I didn't know anything." "What happened?" he asked. Samantha explained. "I heard from Samantha that you wouldn't attend. She said you had to meet your boyfriend's parents on this day, and it was hard for you to tell me. I thought that was understandable." I couldn't help but chuckle at the convincing lie for a reason not to attend my brother's wedding. I was impressed. Then today, when attendees noticed our uncle's absence, they started asking why the chief guest wasn't there. Someone close to our uncle mentioned that his daughter was denied attendance, and she's the groom's real sister. Samantha's parents were shocked, saying they knew nothing about it. Relatives and other guests got involved, causing a big commotion. So the wedding turned into chaos, whether it was expected or not. Biting her lip, Samantha glared at me again. "Because of you, I was criticized terribly, called inhumane. If you had answered the phone and come to the wedding, things might have been different, you heartless person." Who's heartless here, I wonder? Uncle, who had been observing quietly, stood up and spoke. I decided not to attend on my own. Emily, in fact, wanted me to be there for her brother. I'm a businessman and currently the president of the Electrical Industry Association. I have connections with Athan's major manufacturing company and your father's component factory, but you've just ruined a good relationship. Your thoughtless actions are going to make your position and even your father's company situation very difficult. By the way, Emily is now a supervisor in our company. She's indispensable, studying technology and management every day. And she's been the secretary of the Electrical Industry Association for 2 years now, building quite a network in the industry. Samantha, who had underestimated me as a poor, troublesome single woman, opened her eyes wide, uttering a ridiculous sound. Indeed, Emily and Ethan lost their real parents when they were young. It's sadder than we can imagine. Uncle's voice was calm yet dignified. But Emily has bravely and positively carved out her life. Judging her foolishly just because she's adopted and single is far more foolish of you, Samantha. Samantha was left speechless, having no words to counter my uncle's argument. Yet again, she lashed out at me, this liar. If your uncle is such an important and wealthy person, you should have told me. Then I would have let you attend the wedding. Enough already. I sharply dismissed her childish behavior. I tried to talk about my work, but you were the one who didn't listen. Remember, we all introduced ourselves on the day we first met. You only remembered that I was single and adopted. People like you, who judge others only by their titles or appearances, end up in situations like this. I'm not living here because I can't afford to live alone. I want to be with my parents, but we are a family now. As a stranger, you should leave. Wait, you need to help me out here. I find myself unfairly portrayed as the villain in this sisterly dispute. Do something? I'm not your sister. I'm a stranger. I corrected her with a smile. I'm the adorable fiancée of your brother, so I'm like a sister, right? Despite my attempts to clarify, the conversation seemed pointless. You should take responsibility for your own words. I'll take back what I said before if you help me smooth things over, she insisted. There's nothing a stranger like me can do. Wait, goodbye then, I stated firmly. She protested, no, come on, Let's go, as Ethan reluctantly led his protesting fiancé away. Afterward, Ethan and Samantha's engagement was called off, and she had to deal with the wedding cancellation fees. Despite her complaints, her parents accepted that it was her fault. Despite being the daughter of a president, her father's company was just a small factory, and maintaining relationships with Ethan's major company and my uncle's electrical industry association was crucial for survival. Due to her actions, her father had to apologize profusely. Samantha, having caused such a mess, was reprimanded and not allowed to return home. She tried to stay with friends, but after the wedding fiasco, they distanced themselves and no one offered help. Ethan came to apologize, reflecting on his choices. She only liked me because I worked for a major company and had no parents to trouble her. The way she treated you like an obstacle, I hate that I couldn't see through her. Ethan slumped, and we all tried to comfort him. It's good that we weren't married yet, and she was pretty. It's not your fault for being deceived by someone who hid her true self. I reassured him. You're too kind. It's a shame about her, but someday you'll find someone who truly cares for you, I said, hopeful. Here, Ethan, your favorite donuts. Let's have some coffee, I suggested, trying to lighten the mood. This incident somehow brought me closer to Ethan, with whom I had lost touch as adults. I realized I had also been neglecting to contact my brother. The initial news of his engagement was the reason for our reunion, so in a way, I'm grateful to her. Watching Ethan and my aunt and uncle talk like a real family, I pondered these thoughts. Friends, lovers, family, maybe we take those closest to us for granted and forget to show them care. I resolved to cherish my loved ones more. How are your loved ones doing?
Ding dong, clatter, clatter, bang, bang, bang. Are you kidding me? Let me in right now. Do you want everyone to see me causing a scene here? Is this how you treat your husband who's been working on Christmas and comes home to this mess? My husband was furious, pounding on the gate of my family's home. Christmas is usually a special time for us, just before the big day. I accidentally found an envelope recently that revealed my husband's betrayals. As a wife and mother, I've been living through miserable and hopeless days since then. He had been working late, he said, but really he was spending our money on his girlfriend. He barely even bought presents for our kids. I couldn't stand it anymore. I opened the door and confronted him in front of my family. And then, what? What's going on? I'm just an ordinary housewife, living with my husband and 2 children. Depending on your values, some people might spend Christmas Eve with a boyfriend or girlfriend and Christmas Day with their family. And that's how it was for me. I have a brother and a sister, and since we were young, if any of us were dating someone, we'd spend Christmas Eve with them. Our family does things a bit differently from others. We don't always celebrate Christmas on the 25th because of our jobs. Both our parents and us have work that keeps us busy even on holidays. So instead, we made our own tradition, celebrating Christmas when we all had time off during the winter break. We'd cook together, enjoy cake, and watch special year-end TV shows. As we grew up and became independent, my brother, sister, and I kept up this tradition in our own ways. A few years ago, I got married and had children of my own. At first, celebrating Christmas Eve with my husband and our child was a joyful time. But over time, our relationship changed from being romantic partners to focusing more on our family as a whole. Christmas Eve started to feel more like a routine than a special occasion. Eventually, we both agreed that our children's happiness was what mattered most at Christmas. Any discussion about what to do on Christmas Eve slowly faded away. So when my husband said, "Sorry, I might be stuck at work overnight on the 24th. The kids celebrate Christmas on the 25th, right? I'll try to be back by then," it felt like a natural progression of how our Christmas traditions had evolved. I wasn't particularly emotional when I realized my husband wouldn't be home for Christmas Eve. It was just another sign of how our relationship had changed over time. Despite this, I still love him deeply and I'm content with our life together. So I focused on preparing for our kids' Christmas alone, considering it another form of happiness. Hey, is this all the money we have for living expenses this month? Did something unusual happen with your paycheck? I hate to sound critical, but expenses always pile up at year-end. I was hoping we could stretch our budget a bit more with Christmas coming up in about a month. I was shocked to see that the money my husband gave for living expenses was significantly less than usual. I quickly pleaded with him. If I could have managed it, I would have done so already. Things are tight on my end too. There are work-related parties and expenses that I have to cover upfront for the new year. Do you think I enjoy cutting back like this? Managing our budget with limited resources is also a crucial part of being a housewife, isn't it? My husband seemed visibly frustrated and avoided looking at me or talking further. You're right, sorry. I'll do my best too. But it's almost Christmas, right? The kids are eagerly waiting for their special presents. Please, for their sake, let's make this time of year special. I don't want us to not afford their gifts. In our family, there's a rule. Normally, if the kids want something, they have to explain why they need it. But for birthdays and Christmas, they can ask for anything without conditions. That's why I wanted to ensure we have enough money for them, thinking about how much they love Christmas. Honey, let's be a bit more careful with our spending. Kids, what do you want for Christmas? My husband sighed loudly and called the kids over. I want a cartoon DVD set, but I also want a picture book about trains, Dad. Which one do you think is better? Well, the book, definitely. It will help you learn to read, and you can share it with your friends at their houses. You could even read it to younger friends. You'd be such a cool big boy. I really want a new doll set so I can feed it and sleep with it, but my crayons broke recently and now I can't draw. I wonder which wish Santa will grant. I think crayons would be great, Lena. You're so talented at drawing, and I love seeing your artwork. Ask Santa for some really nice ones, even better than the ones you had before. But what about the dolls? Can't you listen to what I want? Santa only visits good children. Naughty kids who are selfish get nothing. I'll ask for crayons. While pretending to listen to the kids, my husband clearly pushed them towards the cheaper options. Aaron's gift can be from a used bookstore, and Lena's gift can be from the dollar store. This way, we won't have to spend extra money on Christmas. Do you think spending money is the only solution? How foolish, he sneered, making sure only I could hear him. Extra expenses? That's not saving money. My husband called our children's eagerly anticipated presents extra expenses, manipulating their innocent minds to suit his agenda. I began to deeply resent such behavior from my husband. Then, after a while, Mom, look, a sparkly letter. It was in Dad's work bag. Could it be from Santa? While my husband was in the bath, my daughter had apparently opened his work bag and excitedly showed me the beautifully decorated envelope she found. You shouldn't have taken that without asking. Give it here and I'll put it back, okay? What could it be? I took the envelope from my daughter. Since it hadn't been opened, curiosity got the better of me and I peeked inside. A reservation for a Christmas dinner for 2 at a hotel on the 24th. But he was supposed to be working overnight on the 24th. Several questions raced through my mind. Just then, my husband's phone made a notification sound. Startled, I glanced over at his phone. It seemed to be getting a flurry of messages in a short span of time. Normally, I wouldn't pay much attention to his phone or how often it rang, but with a sense of unease, I reached for it. What's going on? My eyes fixed on the screen. All the messages flooding my husband's phone were from someone named Nancy. Judging by the selfie that appeared to be her profile picture, she was much younger than me. Although I couldn't see the content of the messages, the heart emojis made it clear they were not just from a casual acquaintance. It seemed too coincidental. A small dark suspicion about my husband began to grow within me. Once I started doubting him, it was hard to let go of those feelings. For the next few days, I found myself sneaking peeks at my husband's phone. Those days were enough to turn my suspicions into conviction. Nancy was likely my husband's mistress, and he planned to spend the Christmas dinner with her on the 24th. He even hinted at an extra special gift for her, their excitement for each other uncontainable. To get more concrete information, I hired a private investigator. Catching my overly confident husband in the act seemed easy, and the results came back quickly. According to the investigation, Nancy was a temp at my husband's company. They had started their affair a month ago, and all the nights he told me he was working late were actually spent with Nancy. The recent drastic cut in our living expenses was likely to fund his affair with her. Clutching the investigator's report, tears of frustration overflowed. In just 1 month, my husband had come to prioritize another woman over his family. My efforts in taking care of the house, believing he was busy with work, and our children's kindness in holding back their desire to play with their father, all felt unbearably pathetic. The shock of my husband's betrayal was too significant to ignore. I didn't know what to do at first, but I have a plan of my own. I won't let this slide without a fight. Wiping away my tears, I stood up energetically and began to prepare my own special gift for my husband. On the morning of December 24th, I sent off my husband as usual, then I headed to my parents' house with the kids. Welcome. It's been so long since we've all been together like this. It feels just like when you, your brother, and your sister used to live here, my mom said. Spending quality time with Dad is great, but this year felt especially exciting. At my parents' house, They were delighted by the festive Christmas atmosphere, enjoying decorating a large Christmas tree they had pulled out of storage. With the kids, we spent the entire day having a fun Christmas party. The next morning, the kids were ecstatic about the presents placed at the base of the Christmas tree they had decorated. For my son, I got a DVD and a picture book, and for my daughter, a doll and crayons. We told them these gifts were from Santa and also from Grandpa and Grandma. The kids played happily with their new toys while the adults watched them with smiles. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. I looked at my phone and saw I had a call. I stepped outside to answer it. It was my husband, sounding very upset. "Hey, where are you? I just got home from work, but my key doesn't fit the lock and the doorbell isn't working. What's going on?" I could hear him messing with the door handle through the phone. "Calm down, you're making a lot of noise. No one is there because we don't live there anymore. We finished moving out yesterday. You were too busy with work to notice, I guess. By the way, you've been shaking that doorknob for a while. Isn't that kind of like trying to break in? If you break the door, it's not my problem." I laughed at him. Even though he was still confused, he realized I had tricked him and started yelling angrily. "Don't mess with me, doing all this without telling me. Where did you put my stuff? Bring it back now. All your things were taken by your parents yesterday. They kept apologizing to me, saying how sorry they were for what you did. Make sure to apologize to them when you get back." "What? Huh?" After finding out about my husband's affair, I told both our families everything. I explained how he was obsessed with a younger woman named Nancy, spending our money on her instead of on our family. He even cut down on our living expenses and the kids' Christmas gifts. He lied about working overnight just to be with her, and I decided to ask for a divorce. After I told everyone through tears, my parents, his parents, our siblings, and even the kids supported my decision. So we moved out of the house on Christmas Eve while my mother took care of the children. Our siblings also helped with the move. With everyone's help, we emptied the house quickly, which brings us to now. So everyone knows what you've done, and no one in the family is on your side. You caused this mess, and now you have to deal with it. I explained everything to my husband clearly. By the time I finished explaining everything, my husband was furious and started shouting at me. "You worthless woman! Your disrespectful attitude towards me, your husband, is the real problem here. I am the precious only son, you know. Blaming others while you're no saint yourself, acting all high and mighty. My parents siding with you. Ha, you must have played the victim and cried to them. Who do you think my parents will ultimately believe, their precious son or some outsider woman? You're as foolish as ever, Hava. I'll be demanding alimony from you right away." "Oh really? Then go ahead and talk to them now. Here, be my guest." Saying that, I turned on the speakerphone on my cell. "Then I never thought you were such a rotten person. Are those the words of someone who has committed adultery? You are the worst. You're the shame of our family." Where did it all go wrong? May and Lars, who had been by my side during the call, unleashed their anger at my husband over the phone. "Dad, Mom, why are you with her?" My husband began to tremble, utterly taken aback by the unexpected rebuke from his parents. "Why? Because it's Christmas. Maitline, who is back at her parents' house, invited us to spend the day with her, even though we are the parents of the man who betrayed his family. Do you understand how Maitline felt all this time? While you were betraying her, she was working hard to take care of the children on her own. We've never been so ashamed and embarrassed of you. We won't defend you unconditionally. You're an adult and made your choices. Do what you want, but don't involve us again. We refuse to be used by you." May and Lars scolded him, their voices trembling with anger. Their words made me so happy I couldn't hold back my tears. "What? You're at Maitlane's parents' house. Anyway, I'm coming over, so listen to my side of the story. It's unfair to only hear one side at times like these, right? You'll see who the real victim is, right, Dad?" Regardless of our situation, my husband tried to win his parents over, but it was pointless. Without listening to his claims, my father-in-law hung up and turned off the phone after saying a few words to me. Then he turned off all our phones, including Maitlane's, and said, "Let's go back inside. The kids are waiting for their mom." My father-in-law said this with a gentle smile, and my mother-in-law gently patted my back. We all went back inside together. We then had the most enjoyable Christmas party ever, with delicious food, cake, and the children singing and dancing. As the night went on and the children fell asleep, the adults were relaxing when the doorbell started ringing non-stop. Tension filled the room. Everyone knew who would show up uninvited at this hour. "Yes, it's me. Open the door. Are you going to leave me out in the cold on a winter night?" My husband not only kept pressing the doorbell but also started rattling the doorknob as if he might break it. Panic set in, and I was about to go to the door when my parents stopped me. I looked at everyone, nodded, and decided to speak to my husband through the door. "Did you forget? Christmas Eve is for lovers and Christmas is for family, right? We're all having a lovely Christmas together as a family. Did you have a nice Christmas Eve with Nancy?" Now that we're strangers, I don't care what happens to you today. If you don't want to sleep outside in the cold, just leave. Don't provoke me. Should I call the police? Spread rumors in the neighborhood that a cruel wife kicked out her husband for no reason. Open this door right now. No matter what I said, my husband refused to listen and continued causing a scene outside. I started feeling afraid at his persistence. Trembling, my father-in-law smoothly stood up. He exchanged glances with my mother-in-law, who also rose to follow him. My parents and I hurried to the front door with them. When my father opened the door, expecting me to give in, my husband stood there defiantly. "Long time no see, Dad," my husband said smugly. "It's not good to see you. Stop pretending we're friends. You're no longer a son to us, just someone who hurt our family," my father interrupted coldly. My mother joined in, causing a scene at this hour. "Do you even know what time it is? It's incredibly rude. The kids have been asleep for hours. You're not fit to be their father." She glared at him sternly. My husband was shocked to see my usually gentle mother so stern. "I won't let my grandchildren see this anymore. Leave. You're a nuisance. You're no longer part of this family." My father-in-law spoke calmly but with anger, making it clear my husband had to leave. My husband glared at us, looking like he might explode. "I'm calling the police right now," my mother-in-law said firmly. Seeing her pick up the phone, my husband panicked and fled without saying a word of apology. It was another stark reminder of who he truly was. I didn't cry anymore, but I felt an emptiness inside, questioning the purpose of everything I had been through until then. "How about some warm tea, and then you can get some rest?" My mother gently touched my shoulder with a kind smile. Everyone welcomed me back with warmth and understanding. I went to my room, grateful for the unwavering support of my family. Meanwhile, my husband, now without a home, went to his parents' house. They had changed the locks after hearing my side of the story, so he couldn't get in. They turned him away when they returned, unwilling to let a stranger into their home. Left out in the cold, my husband finally realized the gravity of his actions and his parents' words. Now he sincerely regrets his actions and has agreed to the divorce and alimony. I had a lawyer ready just in case, but thankfully it didn't turn into a messy legal battle. After the divorce was finalized, I started a new life at my parents' house with my children. I'm focused on my work and raising my kids with the loving support of my parents. It's busy, but every day feels meaningful. Although I won't see my ex-husband again, I stay in touch with my in-laws. They're wonderful grandparents to my children and a great support to me. Even though we're no longer family on paper, I hope they'll always be part of our lives and continue to watch over the children as they grow. Do you both have everything? Let's go. Don't forget to say goodbye to Grandma and Grandpa. Bye. I silently prayed for these ordinary, peaceful days to last forever and looked forward to celebrating next Christmas together as a family, seeing my children's happy smiles.
Hey everyone, I'm Yasmin, and I want to share a story that sheds light on my incredibly entitled and eccentric mother-in-law, Jessica. My husband Kai suggested sharing this tale because he enjoys reading them from time to time. Before you find it odd, let me clarify that he's well aware of his mother's eccentricities, having been her first victim. Kai's upbringing involved Jessica, who divorced his father shortly after his birth. He experienced her craziness firsthand and distanced himself as much as possible. Unfortunately, Jessica's poor taste in men persisted, leading to another abandonment by Kai's father. While Kai's father paid child support initially, he later terminated his rights. "I've never met the man and have no desire to." Claiming to have single-handedly raised Kai, Jessica exploited him to extract money from her family for an extended period. When they grew weary of supporting her, she found a job but continued to siphon money from Kai. During his teenage years, Jessica coerced him into working, all the while pocketing his earnings until he turned 18. Recognizing the need to break free, Kai took out student loans and secured a scholarship for college. That's where we crossed paths. Kai shared the harrowing stories of his mother's behavior, and I couldn't help but be furious on his behalf. I questioned how he could still be in contact with her. He explained, "I was raised by a narcissist. She conditioned me to believe that taking care of her is my responsibility." Distressed by Kai's situation, I used my savings to kickstart his therapy. Although initially resistant, Kai eventually embraced the process, gaining confidence and slowly standing up to his manipulative mother. Recognizing the positive changes, I continued supporting him. Unsurprisingly, Jessica never liked me. During our first meeting, she accused me of being a gold digger who poisoned her son against her. I defended myself, highlighting that I used my money to help Kai access therapy. Over the years, Kai and I graduated, got married, and secured good jobs. Despite working hard for our success, Jessica persisted in her financial demands. She eventually got married to a disrespectful man named Frank, and Kay reluctantly agreed to rent her an apartment. When we bought a house, she expressed her satisfaction, stating, "Heave, I'm so happy that you finally bought a house. I was getting tired of living in an apartment. So when can Frank and I move in?" "Excuse me, what are you talking about?" "Well, I'll be moving into your house with Frank. That's what I'm saying. Why should I live in an apartment when you are housing your wife for free?" "Jessica, we both bought this jointly. I literally co-own this place with Kai. I don't live here for free. You are the one who lives in the apartment for free since Kai pays the rent." "Watch your mouth, Jasmine. I don't tolerate disrespect from anyone. I'm talking to my son about his house. I didn't ask you anything. I have the right to talk since it's also my house you are talking about. You're not staying with us, and neither is Frank. That's for my son to decide, and he knows that it's his responsibility to take care of me." "I'm already taking care of you, Mom. You don't get to move into my house to raise me. That's not how it works, and there is no chance of an argument, so don't even try." "You're acting like an entitled brat, Keith. Your mom worked hard to raise you, and you need to take some responsibility for her. Now, be a good son and give us a copy of your keys so that we can move in." "You don't get to say what I do with my house keys, Frank. Neither of you is even getting a copy of our keys. I'll say this for the last time, you two will not be moving into our house. That's it." You would think that's the end of it. Well, it isn't. For days, Frank and Jessica kept harassing us and guilting us. Jessica even said some horrible things to me because she thought I was manipulating Keith and making him abandon her. It was funny at first, but soon we got fed up. One day, Kay went to their apartment to drive it into their heads that they wouldn't be moving in. We thought our point got across since we stopped hearing from them. Problem solved. Well, not quite. A month after we moved into our house, we had a small vacation coming up. After saving for years, we finally decided to go on a break to celebrate our house purchase. It was supposed to be a relaxing vacation for the two of us by the beach. We both took time off and decided to take things easy for that week. We flew there and had a blast from the first day itself. But as evening came, something shocking happened. I got a notification from the Ring camera on my house's door. Yes, we did set up surveillance cameras before we went on vacation since we didn't ask anyone to house sit. We thought that it would be important. Now, I had no idea who would even show up at the door. The neighborhood is pretty safe, and we have lived there before. Hardly anything ever happened there, so I was curious why there was so much activity at the house. I opened my phone to see what the hell was going on there. What I found in the live camera footage shocked me. There I saw my dear mother-in-law Jessica and her new husband Frank moving into our freaking home. Yes, they somehow got into our house and brought 12 bags of clothes. Literally 12 freaking bags. They were moving into the guest room and setting up everything there. Jessica even went into the kitchen to make herself some food. I was shocked and angry at what I was witnessing. I knew that I needed to tell Keith immediately. So I called him over and said, "Keith, I have some news. I think we need to talk about it right now. Right now." "What's so important, Yasmin? We're on vacation. I'm kind of not in the mood for any serious stuff today." "Trust me, Keith, I'm not in the mood to deal with horrible people either. But this situation is dire and needs our immediate attention. I'm afraid it's about your mother. Mom's making trouble again." "Oh God, what is it this time? Did she manage to break into our house or something?" From the look I gave Keith, it became apparent to him that he wasn't off the mark. His eyes immediately turned into saucers as he tried to make sense of the situation. I pulled out my phone and showed him what Jessica and Frank were doing. He was shocked and looked very angry at what he was seeing. I mean, his joke turned out to be the truth. His mom broke into our new house and was moving in furniture with her husband. Keith looked a little pissed off and said, "You can leave it to my mother to surprise me in the worst way possible. Looks like she didn't take the hint at all. We made it clear that day that she won't be living with us. I'm even surprised as to how she got the keys to our house. It just blows my mind. Her new husband is a sleazy guy, Yasmin. We both know that. I'm afraid he may have gotten his hands on our keys and made a copy. I wouldn't put it past him. We will need to go back and change the locks. That's the only way we can make sure that they don't budge into our house anytime they like. But what do we do about this current problem? Do you have something in mind?" "Look, I know they are your parents and all, but I really want to call the cops on them. What they are doing is illegal and downright scary. They can't be trusted anymore. Either calling the cops and getting no contact with them is the best solution possible." I gave Keith some time to turn the idea in his head. I could see that he was thinking hard and had grim lines on his forehead. but it didn't take too long for him to come back with a response, and his response was way better than I imagined. He said, "You know what, Yasmin? Let's do it." "What? Are you sure about that? There'll be no going back once we do this, and the cops will drag your mom and Frank to the streets with all their things." "I know that, Yasmin. I've given them enough chances to improve themselves. They just betrayed my trust every time. I have to stop somewhere. There has to be some consequences. What they did today is not only a breach of our privacy but also illegal. I think it's time they realize they can't do whatever they want. Would you go no contact with them as well?" Of course, my reluctance to do that has already created a lot of problems. I should have done this a long time ago. I'm freaking stupid and thought mom would grow some sense after I got married. Since that's not happening, I'm going to distance myself from them. It's the only way, and I am actually feeling good about it. Okay then, if you're on board with it, let's proceed with that plan. But first, let's call your mom and give her a warning. Just a final chance to make this right. I don't have any hope, but we can get evidence that we didn't allow her in our house. Keith agreed with the plan and called his mother. She didn't pick up the first time through the security cameras. I could see that she was visibly annoyed and went to Frank. They discussed something before answering the call. When we rang the second time, she put the phone on loudspeaker so that Frank could join in as well. She said, "Hey Keith, how are you doing? Is the vacation going fine? You need to tell me what's going on over there." "I don't know what you're talking about. Everything is just breezy here. Nothing to worry about really." "Jessica, you and Frank breaking into our house is nothing to worry about." Jessica went quiet when I said that. On the security tapes, we could see that she tensed and looked at Frank again. I mean, Frank was better at fooling and manipulating people, so this was expected. Jessica wanted her new husband to come up with some plan. "What are you even talking about, Yasmin? Kay, your wife has gone crazy. You need to shut her up." "Don't talk to my wife like that. We know what you two are up to. With cameras in the house, both inside and out, there's no point in lying to us. We can see you on our phones right now." "Wait, what? How dare you spy on us, Keith? This is unacceptable. What about our privacy? You should have been more thoughtful." It was ironic how Jessica was offended by the fact that we could see their activities on our screen. She talks about respecting people's privacy when she broke into someone's house and made it her own. I didn't know if Jessica was trying to deflect or if she was genuinely offended. I have a good guess that it's a little bit of both. Her words sparked something in me, and I said, "That's rich coming from you, Jessica. You are the one who broke into our private home when we clearly told you that you are not allowed in." "I don't care what you say, Yasmin. It's my son's house too, so I have the right to be here. I'm his mother and should be staying with him." "I already said no to that, Mom. Just because you're my mother doesn't mean you will go wherever I go. You already have an apartment that I pay for. Who wants to live in that tiny apartment when you have brought such a big house?" "You're turning into such a selfish man after getting married, Keith. This is unacceptable. You can't expect your own mother to live in an apartment while you enjoy a whole house with your wife. That decision is not up to you, Mom. You shouldn't have just packed up your stuff and moved into the house. How did you even get the keys?" Both me and Kay were troubled by this question and needed answers immediately. Also, we needed them to confess to their wrongs so that we could use that to report them to the police. And our hunch was right. Frank said, "Well, since you decided to be a brat and ignore your mother, I went and made a copy of your keys." "Who the hell told you to touch my keys? I didn't give you permission to do that." "I don't need your permission, Kai. I'm your stepdad. I have the authority to do what I think is right. You don't get to question me." "I don't care who you are to me, Frank. I'm a grown-ass man and don't need a parent. What you did was forgery, and both are offenses under the law." "Kai, how dare you talk to Frank like that? He only did this because he knew I was sad. A mother should have the keys to her son's house for emergencies and all, you know? For emergencies and breaking in whenever you want? You're insane, Jessica. You need to get off our property with all your stuff within an hour. If you don't, we will call the cops." That made Jessica and Frank look frightened. They visibly panicked and whispered something amongst themselves. Their panic was clear on their faces, and we could see that through the cameras. In the end, they said, "Don't threaten us, woman. This is not your house. This is my son's house. Only he gets to make those decisions. This house belongs to both Yasmin and me, and we both want you to get out before I'm forced to call the cops." "Trust me, Mom, that will be ugly." "What an ungrateful brat you are, Keith. How can you threaten to kick out your mom?" She was given a warning and didn't listen. Now both of you will be facing consequences. You have exactly 1 hour to vacate my house before I call the cops. Remember that I have you on surveillance and I will know what you are doing. Frank and Jessica started to yell at us when we hung up. We didn't want to go into an argument with them anymore. Their entitled brains were not meant to participate in conversations or healthy discussions. They didn't care about anything but themselves. We gave them 1 hour while we put all the proof into a folder. Through the cameras, we could see that they were having a discussion but didn't budge. Instead, Jessica started to unpack her bags. That made us both angry as hell. As the hour passed, we called the police with all the evidence we had. Thankfully, they took us seriously and went to our house. We saw the whole fiasco unfold in front of our house. The cops went there and knocked at the door. Jessica and Frank opened the door and immediately faked being confused. After the officers told them everything, they called us and sang a different tune. They said, "Kay, why was there a need to call the cops? We just want to live with our son. Why are you making things so difficult? Tell the cops that this was all a misunderstanding." "I don't want you living with me, Mom. I've said that 100 times now. Stop being so freaking entitled. Leave before the cops arrest you and we are forced to press charges." "Kay, don't do this. Please look, we have nowhere to go. You need to let us stay here. Just tell the cops to leave. We will have a calm discussion about this once you come back." "Absolutely not, Mom. You need to back up and go to your apartment. I want my house empty today and right now, Keith. Actually, we can't go back to the apartment. I canceled the lease and sold my furniture. We really have nowhere to go. I thought that she wouldn't mind living with us, so I canceled the lease myself." The audacity of this woman shocked me to the core. She canceled her lease because she thought she could force us to house her. She was freaking insane. Keith was boiling with rage and ready to scream at her sorry ass. He said, "You went behind my back and canceled your lease? What the freaking hell, Mom? You know what? That's not my problem. I don't care where you go. You need to vacate my house." No, Keith. Please listen to me. I've nowhere to go. Don't kick us out. I'm your mother. Do you want your mother to be homeless? You made yourself homeless, Mom, since you don't want to stay in a rented apartment anymore. I won't give you rent money anymore. I'm freaking done. You can take your new man and figure out something for yourself. Get out of my house and don't try to contact me again. At this point, Jessica was literally crying and begging to make us hear her out. She even cried to me and brought up my dead mother to guilt me. They had the very opposite reaction than what she expected. Me and Key got so mad that we shouted at them and hung up. We immediately blocked the numbers because they crossed all our boundaries in one day and somehow made things worse than ever. The cops stayed back at the house and made sure that Jessica and Frank left. I called a mutual friend to help house it until we came back. She also assured me that she would call a locksmith to change our door lock the next day. She's a friend from college, and we trust her a lot. We knew that she would make sure our house was safe. She lived in an apartment, so it was easy for her to come to the house. Frank and Jessica left and went to God knows where. My guess is they spent the night at the hotel and bought new phone numbers to harass us. It didn't work. No relative took their side either because they knew Jessica well enough, and they didn't want to be in her drama. Also, they told her in no uncertain terms that they wouldn't house or help her out in any way. That made Jessica focus her attention back on us. For the rest of our vacation, we kept our phones switched off. We opened our phones once daily to check for emergencies, and that's it. We also only called our friend to make sure everything was all right. Yes, Jessica and Frank did show up again and tried to get in. They left after the friend threatened to call the cops again. We're thinking of sending a cease and desist letter before they escalate their behavior. Thankfully, they didn't want to know why. When we got back from vacation, we found out that Frank had decided to leave Jessica. Why, you may ask? Because she couldn't house and feed him for free anymore. Jessica was devastated and begged her son to talk to her. She finally realized that she needed her son for money. Keith didn't soften at all. He stuck to the no-contact decision that is still in place today. The last we know from family is that Jessica rented a trailer and still works at the retail store with no hope of retirement in sight.
Hi, I'm Jessica Chen, and this is the story of how my husband's wealthy family learned that money isn't everything, especially when you underestimate the wrong person. I met Marcus at a small coffee shop where I worked while pursuing my computer engineering degree. He was different from the usual suited executives who barely looked at me while ordering their expensive lattes. Despite coming from one of the city's wealthiest families, Marcus would sit at the counter and actually talk to me about technology, coding, and my dreams of starting my own software company. "You're different," he said one day, watching me debug code on my laptop during my break. Most people here just see me as the heir to Wong Enterprises. You see me as just Marcus. I smiled, closing my laptop. That's because money doesn't impress me. Ideas do, dreams do. Our romance blossomed naturally, hidden from his family's judgmental eyes. Marcus knew they wouldn't approve. They had a list of suitable heiresses for him to choose from. But love doesn't follow present paths. When Marcus finally told his parents about us, the explosion was nuclear. A coffee shop girl with a community college degree, his mother, Eleanor Wong, practically spat the words during our first dinner together. She sat at the head of their massive dining table, wearing jewelry that probably cost more than my entire education. Actually, I'm completing my computer engineering degree, I corrected her politely. And it's a state university, not a community college. Same difference, she dismissed with a wave of her manicured hand. Marcus needs someone who understands our world, our social obligations, not some scholarship case. Marcus squeezed my hand under the table. Mother Jessica is brilliant. She's developing innovative software that could revolutionize. Enough. Harold Wong, Marcus's father, slammed his hand on the table. No son of mine will marry beneath his station. End this foolishness now. But Marcus didn't end it. Instead, he proposed the next day, and we had a small private ceremony at City Hall. His parents refused to attend. You'll regret this, Eleanor warned him. She'll show her true colors soon enough. Despite his family's disapproval, we were happy. Marcus supported my studies while I finished my degree, and I started developing my software on the side. We lived in a modest apartment, avoiding his family's social circles and focusing on building our life together. Then I got pregnant. The news should have been joyous. Instead, it set off a chain of events that would change everything. A baby changes things, Eleanor announced, suddenly appearing at our door one day when Marcus was at work. Perhaps we were hasty in our judgment. She invited us to move into the family mansion. Marcus was thrilled, seeing it as a chance to reconcile with his family. I was hesitant, but I wanted our child to know their grandparents, so we moved in. That's when the real nightmare began. Eleanor's acceptance was a carefully crafted trap. She began hosting elaborate parties, parading me in front of their social circle like a circus act. Isn't it charming? She'd say. Our Marcus, so charitable, giving a chance to someone from her background. I endured it all for Marcus's sake, but then I overheard a conversation that chilled me to my core. The girl is becoming a problem, Eleanor told Harold in his study. She's actually trying to patent some software she's developed. Imagine the embarrassment if Marcus's wife starts peddling computer programs like a street vendor. The prenup will protect Marcus's interests, Harold assured her. And once the baby is born. Yes, Eleanor's voice turned cold. Once we have our grandchild, we can deal with the gold digger appropriately. I rushed back to our room, heart pounding. The next day, I discovered they'd been working behind the scenes. My patent application had been mysteriously delayed. My university records showed an investigation into academic irregularities. They were systematically destroying my credibility. When I confronted Marcus, his response shattered my world. You're being paranoid, Jessica, he sighed, not looking up from his phone. Pregnancy hormones are making you irrational. Mother is trying her best to welcome you into our world. Your mother is trying to destroy me. I shouted, showing him the patent interference documents I'd uncovered. Those are just standard legal procedures, he dismissed. Maybe if you'd stop trying to prove yourself and just accept your place in this family. My place? I whispered, finally seeing him clearly. You mean beneath you? Like your mother always said. Before he could respond, Eleanor burst into the room, waving her tablet. How dare you, she shrieked, arguing with my son in his own home, causing him stress with your wild accusations? What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Eleanor clutched her chest dramatically, stumbling. My heart? The stress. She's trying to kill me. Marcus rushed to his mother while Harold appeared from nowhere, pointing at me with rage. Get out. Get out of this house now. Marcus, I pleaded, but he wouldn't even look at me, too busy attending to his mother's theatrical performance. Security guards appeared, escorting me out with just my purse and the clothes on my back. As the massive doors slammed behind me, I heard Eleanor's miraculous recovery, her voice carrying clearly. Finally. Now we can protect our grandchild from that gold digger's influence. I stood there, 5 months pregnant, watching the sun set behind the mansion I foolishly thought could become my home. But I wasn't broken. I was angry. What they didn't know was that I'd seen this coming. I'd been preparing, and I had an ace up my sleeve, one that would make them regret ever underestimating the coffee shop girl. As I walked away from the mansion, my phone buzzed with a text message that would change everything. Ms. Chen, this is David Zhang, Marcus's business partner. We need to talk. There's something you should know about Wong Enterprises and your software. Standing there, one hand on my belly where my baby grew, I smiled. They thought they'd won, but the game was just beginning. The next morning would bring revelations that would shake the Wong family to its core. That night, I met David Zhang at a small, discreet restaurant downtown. Unlike the Wong family's usual flashy establishments, this was a quiet place where serious conversations could happen without interruption. David was already waiting when I arrived, his usually immaculate suit slightly rumpled, suggesting he'd come straight from the office. He stood as I approached, pulling out a chair for me. "Thank you for meeting me, Jessica," he said, his expression grave. "I've been wanting to talk to you for months, but the Wongs, they have eyes everywhere." I sat down carefully, one hand protectively on my baby bump. "What's this about, Mr. Zhang? And why now?" He pulled out a tablet, sliding it across the table. "Take a look at this. It might seem familiar." My heart stopped as I scrolled through the documents. On the screen was my software, the project I'd been working on for years. But it wasn't just my code. It had been modified, expanded, and was now being prepared for launch as Wong Enterprises' newest product. "They stole my work," I whispered, anger building in my chest. David nodded grimly. "Not just stole it. They've built their entire new digital division around your framework. That standard legal procedure blocking your patent? It was so they could file their own patent first. But how did they?" I stopped, realization dawning. "Marcus. He had access to my laptop, my files." "Marcus is just a puppet." David leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Eleanor and Harold have been running the company into the ground with outdated strategies. They needed a win. Your software was their salvation, but they couldn't bear the thought of owing their success to the coffee shop girl." I remembered all the times Marcus had asked about my project, showing sudden interest in the technical details. How Eleanor had insisted I use the superior computer in their home office. They'd been gathering my work piece by piece. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked David. "You're their business partner." He smiled grimly. "Partner? More like their latest target. I built the Asian market division from nothing. Now that it's profitable, they're trying to push me out too. Just like they did to you." He pulled out another document, a contract. "But I got something they don't know about. 20 years ago, Harold's father gave me special voting shares. In writing. If combined with other shareholders, these shares could force a board review." My mind raced with possibilities. "And what do you want from me?" "Justice," he said simply. "Your software is revolutionary, Jessica. But they're implementing it wrong. Their shortcuts will make it vulnerable. When it fails, and it will fail, thousands of businesses will be compromised." I sat back, processing this information. "So you want to stop them?" "I want to help you take back what's yours," he corrected. "And in the process, maybe we can save Wong Enterprises from itself." Over the next few hours, David laid out everything. The Wong family's perfect image was a facade. Their fortune was built on taking credit for others' innovations. My software wasn't the first thing they'd stolen, just the most recent. "There's more," David said, pulling out one final document. "Remember that prenup they made you sign? The one Marcus said was just a formality?" I nodded, my throat tight. "It has a clause about intellectual property. Any IP developed during the marriage belongs to both parties equally. When they stole your software, they actually gave you a legal claim to half of its value." I laughed bitterly. "They'll have the best lawyers in the country." "Yes," David smiled. "But we have something better. We have proof." And he paused dramatically. "We have your backup files." My head snapped up. "What?" "That day you came to my office 6 months ago to discuss cloud storage solutions. I noticed you uploaded something to a secure server. I've kept it safe, untouched, original timestamps intact." Tears welled in my eyes as I remembered. I'd been so careful, so paranoid about backing up my work. That paranoia had just saved me. Here's what we're going to do, David continued, outlining a plan that would make Eleanor's head spin. But we need to move fast. They're announcing the software launch at the annual shareholders meeting next week. I placed both hands on my belly, feeling my baby kick as if in agreement. I'm ready. The next week was a blur of preparation. David's lawyers worked around the clock, preparing documents. Tech experts analyzed my original code against Wong Enterprises' stolen version, documenting every theft. But the real masterstroke came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Wong. A timid voice called me 3 days before the shareholders meeting. It was Amy, Eleanor's personal assistant. I have something you should see. She handed me a USB drive, hands shaking. I've worked for Mrs. Wong for 15 years. The things I've seen, the people she's destroyed. I can't do it anymore. Everything's on here. Every email, every hidden document, every secret meeting. I knew it must have cost her to do this. Thank you, Amy. Just... She hesitated at the door. Make it count. The morning of the shareholders meeting dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a conservative black maternity dress, my hair pulled back professionally. David met me at his office. Ready? He asked, helping me out of the car. I nodded, squaring my shoulders. More than ready. As we walked into Wong Enterprises headquarters, employees stopped and stared. News of my dramatic exit from the Wong mansion had spread. No one expected to see me here. We rode the elevator to the top floor, where the boardroom was already filling with shareholders. Through the glass walls, I could see Eleanor holding court, Marcus at her side like an obedient schoolboy. The moment we walked in, silence fell. Security. Eleanor shrieked, half rising from her chair. Remove this woman immediately. I wouldn't do that, David's voice cut through the room. Not unless you want to explain to the shareholders why you're removing someone who owns half of today's big announcement. Harold's face turned purple. What nonsense is this? I stepped forward, my voice clear and steady. Before you launch my software as your own, perhaps we should discuss the original source code and the rather interesting emails planning its theft. Marcus went pale. Eleanor's perfectly made-up face contorted with rage. But before they could speak, the screens around the room flickered to life. Side-by-side comparisons of my original code and their stolen version appeared. Emails detailing their plan to block my patent. Security footage of Marcus copying files from my laptop late at night. And finally, Eleanor's own voice. Once we have the code, get rid of the girl. Marcus can find a suitable wife later. The software is what matters. The room erupted in chaos. But I wasn't done yet. As chaos erupted in the boardroom, Eleanor tried to regain control. These are obviously fabricated documents, she shouted over the murmuring shareholders. This woman is trying to extort our family. I smiled calmly, remembering all the times she dismissed me as just a coffee shop girl. Fabricated? I pressed a button on my tablet. Like these surveillance videos from your home office? The ones showing Marcus copying my files at your direction. The screens switched to crystal clear footage. Eleanor's face went from red to white as she watched herself instructing Marcus, pointing at my laptop. Or perhaps, I continued, these bank transfers, the ones showing payments to delay my patent application. Emmy kept very detailed records, Mrs. Wong. At the mention of her assistant's name, Eleanor's composure cracked completely. You treacherous little. Mother, stop. Marcus finally spoke up, but I cut him off. No, Marcus, you don't get to play peacemaker now. Not after what you did. I turned to address the shareholders directly. Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to vote on launching a software platform that was stolen from its original creator, me. A platform that, due to rushed and improper implementation, has critical security flaws. David stepped forward, distributing documents to the board members. Our technical team has identified 17 major vulnerabilities in their current version. If launched, it would expose client data to significant risks. One of the older board members, a distinguished woman I recognize as Patricia Chen, no relation, stood up. Mr. Zhang, are you vouching for these claims? I am, David replied firmly, and I'm exercising my special voting rights to call for an immediate leadership review. Harold slammed his fist on the table. You have no such rights. Actually, he does. A new voice spoke from the doorway. Everyone turned to see an elderly man entering. Harold's father, Richard Wong, the company's founder. I had never met him, but David had reached out to him last week, sharing everything we'd uncovered. Richard had been living in semi-retirement, trusting his son to run the company ethically. Our evidence had brought him back. "Father," Harold stammered. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly," Richard cut him off. "I understand that you and Eleanor have betrayed everything this company stands for. Stealing from a pregnant woman, destroying careers to cover your tracks." He turned to me. "Mrs. Wong, on behalf of the company I built, I apologize." Eleanor wasn't finished. She played her last card. "Marcus, tell them she trapped you with that baby. Tell them." "Enough," Marcus shouted, surprising everyone. He walked over to stand beside me. "The baby is mine, and Jessica is my wife, and everything she's saying is true. His voice broke. "I helped steal her work. I betrayed her trust, because I was too weak to stand up to you, Mother." The room fell silent. Patricia Chen stood again. "I move for an immediate vote on leadership change and project review." "Seconded," came multiple voices. What happened next was like watching a decades-old empire crumble in minutes. The vote was unanimous. Harold and Eleanor were removed from their positions pending a full investigation. Richard Wong was reinstated as interim CEO. "Mrs. Wong," Richard addressed me, "would you be willing to work with our technical team to properly implement your software? With full credit and compensation, of course." I placed a protective hand on my belly. "I have a counter-proposal." Over the next hour, I outlined my vision, a new division within Wong Enterprises, focused on ethical innovation and developer support, a place where ideas would be nurtured, not stolen, where credit would be given where due. "And I want David Zhang as my co-director," I finished. "His integrity helped expose this situation. That's the kind of leadership this company needs." Richard smiled. "Done." As the meeting adjourned, Eleanor and Harold were escorted out, their access badges disabled. Marcus approached me hesitantly. "Jessica, I know I don't deserve forgiveness." "You're right, I cut him off." "You don't. Not yet." I touched my belly again. "But this little one deserves to know their father. If you're willing to earn back trust, slowly we can discuss co-parenting arrangements." He nodded, tears in his eyes, and left quietly. 3 months later, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. We named her Grace, a reminder that strength can come with mercy. Eleanor and Harold faced legal consequences for their actions, but avoided jail time in exchange for returning all stolen intellectual property to its rightful owners. Not just mine, but dozens of others they'd stolen from over the years. The software platform, properly implemented, became Wong Enterprises' most successful launch ever. Our ethical innovation division attracted brilliant minds who might have otherwise been intimidated by corporate politics. Marcus and I eventually divorced, but he became a better man and a good father to Grace. Sometimes losing everything helps you find your true self. As for me, I run my division from the same office where Eleanor once plotted to destroy me. But unlike her, I keep my door open to anyone with a good idea, regardless of their background. Last week, a young barista came to pitch her software idea. As I listened to her passionate presentation, I smiled, remembering another coffee shop girl with big dreams. "Tell me more," I said, pulling out my laptop. "And let's talk about protecting your intellectual property rights first. Because success isn't just about winning. It's about changing the game for those who come after you."
Hi, I'm Emma Thompson, and this is the story of how an abandoned farm turned me from the family disappointment into someone my greedy relatives couldn't ignore. Sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in the places others consider worthless. I still remember the day of the will reading like it was yesterday. The mahogany-paneled law office felt suffocating as our family lawyer, Mr. Harrison, adjusted his glasses and began reading my parents' final wishes. The tragic car accident that took both of them had left a $50 million fortune to be divided between my sister Sarah and me. Or so I thought. To our beloved daughter Sarah, Mr. Harrison Reed. We leave our investment portfolio, the family mansion, and all liquid assets. Sarah's perfectly lipsticked mouth curved into a triumphant smile. To Emma, he continued, his voice softening slightly, we leave Grandpa Thompson's old farm property in Montana. The room fell silent. Then Sarah's laughter shattered it. A farm, she sneered, her designer bracelet jingling as she waved dismissively. Oh, this is perfect. Little Emma always did prefer playing in the dirt to attending charity galas. I sat there, stunned. The 200-acre farm had been abandoned for 20 years, ever since Grandpa passed away. Dad had always called it worthless, refusing to even visit it. Now it was my only inheritance. There must be some mistake, my Aunt Patricia interjected, her face pinched with concern that wasn't for me. Richard and Margaret would never leave their daughter with just dirt. Mr. Harrison shook his head. The will is quite clear. The farm, including all structures and contents, belongs to Emma. Sarah stood up, smoothing her channel dress. Well, sis, enjoy your barns and chickens. I've got a portfolio to manage. She paused at the door, her smile cruel. Don't worry, if you need a loan, I'm sure we can work something out. After all, what's family for? I left the law office that day with a single manila envelope containing the farm's deed and keys. 20 years of dust coated everything when I arrived at the property the next day. The main house was a weathered 2-story structure that had seen better days, but it was the massive old barn that caught my attention. Grandpa Thompson had been an odd man, brilliant but eccentric. He'd made his fortune in mining engineering before retiring to this farm, where he spent his last years tinkering in that barn. Dad always said the old man had lost his mind, wasting his genius on a worthless piece of land. The barn door groaned as I pushed it open. Sunlight filtered through gaps in the wooden walls, illuminating decades of cobwebs. Old farming equipment sat rusting in corners. But something felt off about the space. The dimensions didn't quite match the exterior. I remember following Grandpa here as a child, watching him disappear for hours behind a hidden door. Our little secret, he'd whisper, winking. After his death, no one could find that door. Dad searched briefly before declaring it another of his father's delusions. But I remembered. 3 taps on the north wall, then pushed the 4th board from the bottom. My hands trembled as I followed the long-forgotten pattern. Click. A section of wall swung inward, revealing a staircase descending into darkness. My phone's flashlight illuminated the way down to a massive underground room. What I saw inside made my heart stop. Covering the walls were detailed geological surveys, mining charts, and chemical analyses. In the center sat a sophisticated testing lab, preserved under dust covers. But it was the safe in the corner that changed everything. The combination was my birthday. Grandpa never forgot it, even in his final days. Inside, I found a leather-bound journal and a USB drive. The journal's first page read, "To Emma, the only one who ever bothered to listen." As I read through his meticulous notes, tears filled my eyes. Grandpa hadn't lost his mind. He'd made a discovery that would reshape the entire mining industry. The worthless farm sat on top of one of the largest rare earth element deposits in North America. He developed a revolutionary extraction process that was both efficient and environmentally friendly. The USB drive contained detailed patents, already filed, but never activated. Grandpa had been waiting for the right moment, and the right person, to bring his discovery to life. My hands shook as I realized what this meant. The farm wasn't worthless. It was worth billions. But I knew that if my family found out, they'd try to take it from me. Sarah would hire the best lawyers, claim I wasn't competent to handle such a discovery. I needed to move carefully, protect myself before anyone realized what Grandpa had left me. I spent that night in the old house, reading through every page of his journal. In the morning, I made 3 calls to a patent lawyer, a mining engineer, and an investment banker I'd befriended during my own quiet years working in finance, a career my family had dismissed as modest. "Keep this absolutely confidential," I told each of them. "I'm about to show you something that will change everything." Over the next 6 months, I worked in secret. While Sarah posted photos of her luxury vacations and charity galas, I assembled a team of the industry's best minds. The old barn became our command center, its hidden lab modernized with cutting-edge equipment. "These patents are revolutionary," Dr. Chen, our lead engineer, explained during one late-night session. "Your grandfather's extraction process could make rare earth mining both profitable and environmentally sustainable. Do you realize what this means?" I did. With the growing demand for rare earth elements in everything from smartphones to electric vehicles, we were sitting on a gold mine. Literally and figuratively. We'd incorporated Thompson's sustainable resources quietly through a series of shell companies. I used my savings from years of careful investing to fund initial operations. Every step was calculated to keep my family in the dark. Then came Sarah's wedding, a lavish affair at the family mansion. I almost didn't attend, but I knew my absence would raise questions. "Oh, Emma," Sarah exclaimed with false warmth when I arrived. "How's farming going?" Her new husband, a hedge fund manager, snickered. "It's quite educational," I replied mildly. "Actually, I've been meaning to ask, how's the tech sector of your portfolio performing?" Sarah's smile faltered slightly. "Why? Just curious. I heard rare earth element shortages are causing problems for manufacturers. Must be affecting stock prices." "I haven't checked recently," she admitted, clearly uncomfortable with her lack of knowledge. "You should look into it," I suggested, hiding my smile behind a champagne glass. The next morning, while Sarah jetted off to her honeymoon in the Maldives, we broke ground on our first extraction facility. By the time she returned 3 weeks later, Thompson's Sustainable Resources had already secured contracts with 3 major tech manufacturers. The story broke in the Wall Street Journal. Revolutionary mining company disrupts rare earth market. My phone exploded with calls from family members as our company's value soared past $1 billion in its first public trading day. "Emma," Sarah's voice was shrill when she finally reached me. "Why didn't you tell us? We're family." "Are we?" I asked quietly. I thought I was just the girl who got dirt for her inheritance. The next few weeks were chaos. Sarah and Aunt Patricia tried to claim that Grandpa's patents should have been part of the family estate. Their lawyers argued that I had concealed valuable assets. But Grandpa had planned everything perfectly. His will explicitly stated that any halal contents of the farm, including any intellectual property developed there, belonged to me. The hidden lab's existence proved he developed everything on the farm property. The final showdown came at an emergency family meeting called by Aunt Patricia. They all sat around the massive dining table in the mansion, the same table where they'd once mocked my modest career choices. "You have to understand," Sarah pleaded, her designer bracelets clinking nervously. "Dad would have wanted the family to share in this." I pulled out Grandpa's journal, opening to a marked page. "Dear Emma," I read aloud. I'm leaving you this farm because you're the only one who saw its value beyond dollar signs. Your father and sister chased wealth, but you chased knowledge. That's why you'll succeed where they failed." The room fell silent. "You know what the difference is between us, Sarah?" I continued, closing the journal. "When you got the family fortune, I congratulated you. When I built something of my own, you tried to take it. We can work something out," she began, but I cut her off. "Actually, we can't, but I will give you some free advice. Invest in sustainable technology. Thompson Sustainable Resources is about to announce a major expansion." As I walked out of the mansion, Aunt Patricia called after me. "Your parents would be ashamed of how selfish you're being." I turned back one last time. "No, they'd be ashamed. They never saw what Grandpa saw in me. But that's their loss. Just like this company is your loss." Today, Thompson Sustainable Resources is valued at $12 billion. We're revolutionizing the mining industry while protecting the environment. The old farm has become a state-of-the-art research facility, though I kept the barn exactly as Grandpa left it, secret room and all. Sarah still tries to reconcile occasionally, usually when she needs something. Last month, she called about investing in our latest venture. I had my assistant direct her to our public investor relations line. The family mansion was recently put up for sale. Sarah's risky investments and lavish lifestyle had finally caught up with her. I bought it through a shell company and turned it into a science education center for underprivileged kids. Yesterday, I received an invitation to speak at my old high school's graduation ceremony. The topic? Finding value in unexpected places. I accepted immediately, already planning my speech. After all, sometimes the greatest fortune isn't what you're given, but what you discover when everyone else has stopped looking. As for the old farm, I still live in Grandpa's house, though I've renovated it thoughtfully. Every morning, I walk to the barn and tap that secret panel, remembering the man who saw past appearances to true value, both in the land and in me. They say success is the best revenge, but I've learned it's not about revenge at all. It's about proving that true worth isn't in what you inherit, but in what you create. And sometimes, the most valuable inheritance isn't money, it's the wisdom to see what others miss.
I never thought I'd end up working at Sterling Corp, one of the biggest tech companies in Seattle. Growing up in a small town in Idaho, raised by a single mom who worked 2 jobs, corporate life seemed like a distant dream. But here I was, Sarah Collins, 26 years old, sitting at my desk on the 47th floor of Sterling Tower. Well, technically, it was a cubicle, a very small cubicle. "Collins, where's the Johnson report?" I flinched at the sharp voice of Diana Pierce, my immediate supervisor and personal tormentor for the past year. She stood at my cubicle entrance, designer heels tapping impatiently, perfect blonde hair swept into a severe bun. "I sent it 10 minutes ago, Ms. Pierce," I replied, pulling up my sent emails. "Should be in your inbox." Diana's perfectly penciled eyebrows drew together. "I don't see it. Send it again. And fix those margins this time. They're atrocious." The margins were exactly as she'd specified in her last 3 memos about proper document formatting, but I knew better than to argue. "Right away, Ms. Pierce." As she clicked away, I heard the whispers from nearby cubicles. Everyone knew Diana had it out for me, but no one knew why. Maybe it was my Target clearance rack clothes among their designer suits. Maybe it was my state school degree among their Ivy League credentials. Or maybe some people just needed someone to look down on to feel better about themselves. "Don't let her get to you," whispered Maria from the next cubicle. She was one of the few friends I'd made here, a fellow outsider in a corporate jungle. She's just mad because Roberts praised your presentation in the morning meeting. I managed a small smile, but my hands were shaking as I resent the report. One wrong move, one tiny mistake, and Diana would have the excuse she needed to fire me. I couldn't lose this job. Not with Mom's medical bills piling up back home. The next few hours passed in a blur of spreadsheets and passive-aggressive emails from Diana. By 6 p.m., the office was nearly empty, but I was still at my desk, triple-checking a presentation for tomorrow's client meeting. Still here, Collins? No plans for Friday night? Diana's mocking voice made me jump. She stood there with her designer bag, clearly headed out. Just finishing up the Wilson presentation, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. She examined her manicure. Don't forget about tomorrow's office party. Attendance is mandatory. Try to wear something appropriate this time. My cheeks burned, remembering last month's team lunch where she loudly commented on my discount store fashion sense in front of everyone. After she left, I slumped in my chair, fighting back tears. The office party. Another chance for Diana to remind everyone that I didn't belong in her world. Rough day? The gentle voice startled me. A young woman stood by my cubicle, someone I'd never seen before. She looked about my age, with warm brown eyes and a friendly smile. Her clothes were simple, jeans, a sweater, and comfortable flats, making her stand out among Sterling Corp's usual power suits. I'm Emma, she said, perching casually on the edge of my desk. Just started in marketing today. Sarah Collins, I managed, quickly wiping my eyes. Welcome to Sterling Corp. Thanks, she glanced at my computer screen. The Wilson presentation. I nodded miserably. My boss wants it perfect for Monday's meeting. Ah, Diana Pierce. Emma's eyes twinkled. I heard about her. Quite the reputation. That's one way to put it. I found myself relaxing despite everything. There was something about Emma that made her easy to talk to. Hey, want to grab coffee? I know a great little place around the corner. You look like you could use a break. I hesitated, looking at my screen. The presentation will still be there in an hour, Emma said gently. Come on, my treat. Something in her voice made me nod. Grabbing my coat, I followed her to a cozy cafe I'd walked past 100 times but never entered. Over steaming lattes, Emma proved to be an excellent listener. Before I knew it, I was telling her everything about growing up poor, about Mom's illness, about landing this job and Diana's constant harassment. Why don't you report her? Emma asked, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. I laughed bitterly. To who? She's untouchable. Her father plays golf with half the board members. Besides, I need this job. Emma's eyes narrowed slightly. No one's untouchable, Sarah. Trust me on that. There was something in her tone that made me look at her more closely, but she quickly changed the subject, asking about my work in the marketing department. By the time we left the cafe, I felt lighter somehow. Emma had that effect, making problems seem more manageable just by listening. See you at the party tomorrow? She asked as we parted ways. I grimaced. Unfortunately, have to find something appropriate to wear first. Emma's smile turned mysterious. Don't worry about that. Just be yourself. Sometimes things have a way of working out. I should have known then that Emma wasn't just another new employee. Should have noticed how the security guard straightened up when she passed, how she navigated the building with the confidence of someone who'd known it for years. But I didn't. I was too preoccupied with surviving another day in Diana's world. The next evening, I stood in front of my apartment mirror, trying to make my only nice dress look more expensive than it was. The office party was being held at the Vista, one of Seattle's most exclusive rooftop restaurants. Another chance for Diana to remind me I didn't belong. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Don't be nervous. Tonight's going to be interesting. I didn't know then just how right she was. Didn't know that in a few hours everything would change. That Diana Pierce was about to learn a very expensive lesson about judging people. The Vista's rooftop restaurant took my breath away. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered stunning views of Seattle's skyline. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and champagne flowed freely among the well-dressed crowd. I felt painfully out of place in my simple black dress from last year's clearance rack. Well, Diana's voice dripped with disdain. You actually showed up, Collins, and in the same dress you wore to last year's holiday party. How economical of you. She stood with a group of senior managers, all of them smirking at her comment. Her own dress probably cost more than 3 months of my salary. Thank you for noticing, Ms. Pierce. I managed, gripping my water glass tightly. I couldn't afford to lose my temper. Not here, not now. You know, Diana continued loudly, clearly enjoying her audience. Some people just don't understand corporate culture. They think they can walk in from their little small-town lives and fit in at a company like Sterling Corp. She looked me up and down meaningfully. But class and sophistication can't be bought at Target, can they? Laughter rippled through her group. My face burned with humiliation. I should go check on the Wilson presentation, I mumbled, turning to leave. Oh yes, run back to your little cubicle, Diana called after me. That's where poor people like you belong. Not here among actual professionals. I was nearly at the elevator when a familiar voice stopped me. Leaving so soon? Emma stood there, but not in the casual clothes I'd seen her in yesterday. Tonight she wore a stunning red designer dress that made my simple black one look like a dish rack. Yet somehow, her warm smile was exactly the same. I don't belong here, I whispered, fighting back tears. Actually, Emma's eyes sparkled with mischief. You belong here more than most. Come with me. Before I could protest, she linked her arm through mine and led me back into the party. Diana was still holding court near the windows, regaling her audience with what I assumed were more jokes at my expense. Miss Pierce, Emma called out clearly. The room suddenly went quiet. Diana turned, her practiced smile freezing when she saw Emma. I'm sorry, you are? Emma Sterling, my new friend, replied calmly. Though you probably know me better as Robert Sterling's daughter. You know, your CEO. The champagne glass in Diana's hand slipped and shattered on the floor. Nobody moved to clean it up. They were all too busy staring at Emma in shock. I was staring too. Emma Sterling? The Emma Sterling. Heir to Sterling Corp and notorious for working incognito in different departments to learn the business from the ground up. Miss Sterling. Diana's face had gone from smug to sickly pale in seconds. I had no idea you were. We weren't expecting. Clearly, Emma's voice was arctic. I've spent the past month observing various departments, Ms. Pierce. Getting to know our employees. Their strengths. Their challenges. Her eyes hardened. Their bullies. The silence in the room was deafening. I've seen how you treat people you consider beneath you. Emma continued. Particularly Sarah Collins, one of our most promising young marketing analysts. Did you know her campaign proposals have increased our social media engagement by 47% this quarter? Or were you too busy criticizing her clothes to notice her work? Diana's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I was just maintaining professional standards. Professional standards? Emma's laugh was sharp. Let's talk about professional standards, Miss Pierce. Like using company resources to plan your personal vacation, or taking credit for your subordinates' work, or the fact that your father's golf buddies on the board can't protect you anymore because they all retired last month. The color drained from Diana's face completely. Your services at Sterling Corp are no longer required, Emma stated flatly. Security will escort you to clear out your desk. Your replacement starts Monday. She paused, then added with a hint of satisfaction. I believe you know her. Sarah Collins? My head spun. What was happening? You can't do this, Diana sputtered. My father. Your father already agreed to your termination when I showed him the evidence, Emma cut in. He was quite embarrassed, actually. Now I believe security is waiting. 2 security guards materialized as if by magic. Diana looked around wildly, but her former sycophants were suddenly very interested in their shoes. As she was led away, Emma turned to address the stunned crowd. Sterling Corp's success was built on innovation, integrity, and treating people with respect. Anyone who can't embrace those values should follow Ms. Pierce's example and leave. Now, the room quickly emptied, leaving just Emma and me. You planned this? I managed finally. Emma grinned. I've been working undercover in different departments for 6 months, evaluating our corporate culture. Diana Pierce wasn't the only toxic manager we found, but she was by far the worst. She squeezed my hand. Your promotion is real, by the way. Your work caught my eye weeks ago, before I even met you. But why? I gestured helplessly at everything. Because talent and hard work matter more than designer labels, Emma said firmly. Because I grew up watching people like Diana Pierce make life miserable for people like you. Because Sterling Corp needs leaders who lift others up, not tear them down. Tears spilled down my cheeks. Thank you, I whispered. Don't thank me yet, Emma laughed. Wait until you see your new office and your new salary. She linked her arm through mine again. Come on, let's get out of here. That little cafe is still open, and I think this calls for celebration lats. As we left the vista, I couldn't help but smile at the irony. Diana had been right about one thing. I didn't belong in her world of petty bullying and social climbing. I belonged in something better. 3 months later, my marketing team's latest campaign won an industry award. I accepted it wearing a Target dress, standing next to Emma in her designer gown. We both smiled for the cameras, ignoring the whispers about my inappropriate attire. Because we knew something the whispers didn't. Success isn't about where your clothes come from or who your parents know. It's about what you bring to the table. As for Diana, last I heard, she was working at a small firm in Tacoma. Apparently, her father's golf connections weren't as useful as they used to be. Emma and I still meet at that little cafe every week, planning Sterling Corp's future over lats. She's still the same person who sat on my desk that Friday evening, kind, genuine, and completely unimpressed by designer labels. And me? I still shop at Target, but now I do it from my corner office on the 50th floor. Sometimes life has a way of putting bullies in their place. Sometimes all it takes is one person willing to stand up and say enough. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you think is just a friendly new colleague turns out to be exactly who you needed in your corner all along.
Hi, I'm Maya Chin, and this is the story of how my small family restaurant became one of the most exclusive dining spots in New York City, all because my in-laws couldn't resist tearing me down one last time. Cooking has always been my passion. Growing up in a modest Chinese-American household, I spent countless hours in our tiny kitchen, learning traditional recipes from my grandmother while adding my own contemporary twists. My parents wanted me to pursue a respectable career in medicine or law, but my heart belonged to the culinary arts. That's how I met James, my husband. He was a regular at the small Asian fusion restaurant where I worked as a sous chef. He'd come in 3 times a week, always ordering something different, always asking to compliment the chef. When we finally met, the connection was instant. He loved my innovative takes on traditional dishes, and I loved his genuine appreciation for culinary creativity. What I didn't love was his family. The Whittakers were old money, with a lineage that apparently traced back to the Mayflower, something his mother, Elizabeth, mentioned at every possible opportunity. His father, Richard, was a real estate mogul who owned half the commercial properties in Manhattan's Upper East Side. And his sister, Victoria, was a social media influencer who'd never worked a day in her life, but somehow had 3 million followers on Instagram. From the moment James introduced me, they made it clear I wasn't their kind of people. A chef? Elizabeth had said, her voice dripping with disdain. How quaint. But James stood by me, and we got married despite their objections. I thought time would heal the rift, that proving myself as a loving wife would eventually win them over. I was wrong. 5 years into our marriage, I decided to pursue my dream. With our savings and a small inheritance from my grandmother, I opened Fusion Garden, a cozy restaurant that blended traditional Asian cuisine with modern American influences. James supported me completely, even though it meant living on a tighter budget while the restaurant found its footing. The first year was tough, as it is for any new restaurant. We had good days and bad days, But slowly, we were building a loyal customer base. Food critics were starting to take notice, and our weekend reservations were usually booked solid. It wasn't a Michelin star establishment, but it was mine, and I was proud of what we were creating. Then came last year's Thanksgiving. The Whittakers insisted on hosting the entire extended family, including me and James. Usually, I tried to avoid these gatherings, but James convinced me it would be good for business networking. Dad's friends are always looking for new places to host their business dinners, he said optimistically. I should have trusted my instincts. The evening started with the usual subtle jabs. Elizabeth commented on my simple dress, which cost 3 months of profits. Victoria asking if I needed recommendations for a good plastic surgeon. She knew a great one who fixed her nose. And Richard barely acknowledging my existence. But it was during dinner that everything fell apart. So Maya, Elizabeth started, swirling her wine glass with practiced elegance. James tells me you're little. The restaurant is still operating. How surprising. I felt James tense beside me. Yes, we're doing quite well, actually. Our weekend reservations are usually. Oh, darling. Victoria cut in, scrolling through her phone. I saw your reviews online. 3 stars? That's barely passing, isn't it? Actually, 3 stars on Michelin is. I tried to explain, but Richard interrupted. Let's be honest here, he said, putting down his fork with a loud clunk that silenced the table. We've all eaten there. The food is mediocre at best. No innovation, no style, just worthless food from a worthless chef who clearly doesn't understand fine dining. The table fell silent. 20 pairs of eyes turned to me, some with pity, others with poorly concealed amusement. Dad, James started, but I placed my hand on his arm. No, Richard's entitled to his opinion, I said quietly, standing up. Though I find it interesting that someone who thinks my food is worthless has reserved a table at Fusion Garden 6 times in the past month under different names. Elizabeth's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. What's wrong, Elizabeth? Didn't think I'd recognize your husband when he came in wearing different suits, sitting at corner tables, taking detailed notes? Or did you think I wouldn't notice Victoria's anonymous food blogger friends coming in with their cameras? Richard's face had turned an interesting shade of red. We were merely conducting market research. The property your restaurant sits on is owned by the Chang Family Trust. I finished for him. My grandmother's family. Not part of your real estate empire, and not for sale. The silence that followed was deafening. Now, if you'll excuse me, I continued, placing my napkin on the table, I have a restaurant to run. A worthless one, apparently, but it's mine. I walked out of that dining room with my head held high, ignoring Elizabeth's spluttering and Victoria's furious typing on her phone. James followed me to the car, apologizing profusely, but I barely heard him. Because during those painful minutes at the Whittaker family table, a plan had started forming in my mind. A plan that would take 6 months to execute, would cost me every favor I'd ever earned in the culinary world, and would ultimately change everything. They thought my food was worthless. Fine. They wanted to conduct market research. Perfect. They didn't think I understood fine dining. Oh, they had no idea what I was capable of. That night, as James slept, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my old mentor from culinary school, now a celebrated chef in Paris. The second was to a restaurant designer who owed me a favor. And the third was to a certain celebrity chef known for transforming restaurants. By morning, Operation Restaurant Revolution was in motion. The next 6 months would test everything I knew about cooking, business, and revenge. And the best part, the Whittakers would never see it coming. The next morning, I arrived at Fusion Garden earlier than usual. My staff could sense something had changed. There was a new energy in my movements, a spark in my eyes that hadn't been there before. They'd learn why soon enough. Team meeting in 10 minutes, I announced, tying my apron with practiced precision. Everyone needs to be there. And I mean everyone. As my staff gathered in the dining room, servers, line cooks, dishwashers, hosts, I took a deep breath and shared my vision. Over the next 6 months, we would transform Fusion Garden into something unprecedented in New York's culinary scene. But I needed their complete dedication and discretion. What I'm proposing will be the hardest work you've ever done, I told them frankly. Double shifts, late nights, endless practice. Some of you might want to leave, and I'll write glowing recommendations if you do. But if you stay, I smiled, you'll be part of culinary history. To my amazement, not a single person left. They'd seen how I treated my staff, like family, better than my actual in-laws had ever treated me. They trusted me, and that trust was about to pay off. The next few months were a blur of activity, all conducted under absolute secrecy. The restaurant designer I'd called, Marcus, worked after hours, transforming our cozy dining room into something spectacular. We replaced every table, chair, and light fixture. The walls were redone in hand-painted murals depicting the fusion of Eastern and Western culinary traditions. The kitchen was completely reorganized and equipped with state-of-the-art equipment. My old mentor, Chef Jacques, flew in from Paris twice a month to help refine our techniques and train my staff. Together, we revolutionized every recipe on the menu, elevating each dish while maintaining the soul of the original concept. We weren't just making food, we were creating edible art. But the real game changer was my third call from that night, to Gordon Ramsay's team. I'd met Gordon briefly during my culinary school days, and he'd remembered my innovative dessert fusion that won a national competition. When I explained my situation and my vision, he was intrigued enough to get involved. The plan was simple but ambitious. Gordon would feature Fusion Garden in a special episode of his new streaming series about revolutionary restaurants. But first, we had to become revolutionary. For 6 months, we operated on 2 tracks. During regular hours, we maintained our usual service, though with gradually increasing prices and limited availability of reservations. Richard continued his undercover visits, taking notes and looking smug. Victoria's blogger friends kept coming in, posting lukewarm reviews about our decent but uninspired offerings. But after hours, we were building something extraordinary. My staff trained relentlessly. Every dish was deconstructed and rebuilt. Every service pattern was choreographed to perfection. We weren't just preparing food, we were creating an experience. James watched all this with a mixture of pride and concern. "Are you sure about this?" he'd ask, seeing me return home exhausted at 3 a.m. "You don't have to prove anything to them." "This isn't about proving something," I'd reply. "This is about becoming something." Finally, after 6 months of preparation, we were ready. The restaurant closed for 2 weeks for renovations. Victoria immediately posted about how this was the beginning of the end for Fusion Garden. Richard was overheard at his country club betting on how long before we went bankrupt. Perfect. The night of our reopening, I made sure the Whittakers received a special invitation. Elizabeth's RSVP came back with a note about how they were so concerned about our struggles and would of course support family in difficult times. They arrived as a group: Richard, Elizabeth, Victoria, and several of their society friends. James met them at the door, playing his part perfectly. "Maya's in the kitchen," he said, sounding worried. "She's been acting strange lately." They sat at the best table, already smirking, ready to witness what they assumed would be my humiliation. Then the show began. The new fusion garden was unlike anything they'd ever seen. Each dish was a theatrical presentation of flavor and technique. Dim sum that levitated on magnetic plates. Soup served in hand-blown glass spheres that dissolved when touched. Traditional Chinese dishes deconstructed and rebuilt with molecular gastronomy techniques. And in the middle of service, right on cue, Gordon Ramsay walked into the kitchen. The dining room went silent as he emerged a few minutes later, sampling dishes, nodding approvingly. Camera crews captured everything, including the Whittakers' increasingly pale faces. "This," Gordon announced to the cameras, "is the future of fusion cuisine. Chef Maya has created something extraordinary here. Michelin should be calling any day now." Elizabeth's wine glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. Victoria's phone livestream suddenly went quiet. Richard's face had turned that interesting shade of red again. Then I emerged from the kitchen, no longer in chef's whites, but in a designer dress, followed by some of the most renowned food critics in New York. They'd all been there incognito, scattered throughout the dining room. "The property offers are no longer necessary, Richard," I said quietly, stopping at their table. "Fusion Garden isn't for sale. In fact, we're expanding. That empty building next door, the one you've been trying to buy for years. I closed on it this morning. We're opening a culinary school. You can't." Richard sputtered. "Oh, and Elizabeth?" I continued. "Those reservations you've been trying to make under different names. We're booked solid for the next year. But don't worry, I've saved a permanent table for my family." I smiled sweetly. "Right next to the kitchen, where you can smell everything, but taste like anything." The episode aired 3 months later. Fusion Garden became the hottest reservation in New York overnight. We earned our first Michelin star within 6 months, with rumors of a second on the way. The culinary school opened, focusing on fusion cuisine and innovative techniques. The Whittakers? They still come in sometimes, sitting at their assigned table by the kitchen, watching as I live my dream. Victoria's followers love her posts about her talented sister-in-law. Elizabeth brags at her social clubs about how she always saw my potential. Richard even offered to invest in my next venture. I declined, of course. Some things, like self-respect and true passion, are worth more than money or social status. My grandmother taught me that, along with her recipes that started this whole journey. James and I are expecting our first child now. Yesterday, I felt the baby kick while I was developing a new dessert menu. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered, "Remember this, little one. Success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right." The kitchen timer dings, and I have to go. There's a new fusion dish I'm working on, combining my grandmother's secret Chiao Long Bao recipe with a French soufflé technique. The critics will love it. But more importantly, I love it. And in the end, that's what makes anything truly worthless or priceless, not what others say about it, but what you know it's worth. As I head back to my kitchen, I pass the Whittakers' table. It's empty tonight, but the reservation sign is still there, a small reminder of how far I've come. Some might call it petty, keeping that table as a monument to their disdain. I call it seasoning, that extra pinch of satisfaction that makes success taste even sweeter.
Move out. You're obstructing a pregnant woman gently caressing her belly, Alicia instructed. I pondered Alicia's comment, wondering if pregnant women truly displayed a kinder expression. Observing the malice on Alicia's face, I shot a quick glance at David. You can sleep in the storage room, Alicia suggested, and David concurred. My lifelong love for him waned instantly, though a touch of sentiment lingered, leaving me somewhat melancholic. All right then, I replied, and in response, David happily took Alicia's hand. Alicia gazed dreamily at David, and witnessing their intimacy replaced my melancholy with anger bubbling up from within. I'll leave by tomorrow, yeah. Oh, maybe you should stay out tonight after all. This is now mine and Alicia's home, David proclaimed joyously. I nodded slightly before exiting the house, contemplating what lay ahead and cracking a smile. My name is Catherine Taylor. I'm a 46-year-old housewife. Before marriage, I worked intensely, but that was over 20 years ago. Nowadays, I enjoy daily chores and sipping coffee, just an ordinary middle-aged lady. But my hobby is investing. I've been doing it since before marriage. Recently, I've been earning significant dividends, treating myself to lavish hotel brunches and spa visits, leading a pretty elegant life. My husband, David, is 40 years old, a salesman for a major company. He's gained quite a bit of weight, and frankly, he's been rather smelly lately. But he's good with words, given his profession. He may look big, but I love him. I felt he should probably lose some weight for health reasons, but he had this cute, mascot-like appeal, so I didn't see the need to force him into a diet. David and I have a daughter, Emily. She inherits David's features. Slim, almost model-like in beauty. Not just in appearance, she's academically top of her class and excels in sports, even making it to national competitions. She's also humble and works hard. It feels like we, the geese, gave birth to a swan. Both David and I dote on Emily, and we've often been told we're overprotective. David has a bit of a weak spot for younger women, but he chose to marry an older woman like me and cherished our family. So I thought a little wandering gaze here, and there was inevitable. We lived in a condo we bought around the time Emily was born, but it was getting old, and they were considering raising the maintenance fees. Recently, amidst all this, Emily decided to share an apartment near her college. At the same time, one of my relatives approached us about inheriting a now vacant house. David and I decided to renovate that house and move there. But who could have known that this would cause issues between David and me, which have been smooth sailing up until then? The condo we had was a 4-bedroom, including a guest room, but the new house is just 2 bedrooms. Although it's smaller than before, considering our retirement, we made it a single story, and it's been very comfortable. One of the rooms, which serves as a study and a guest room, can be divided to make an additional room for Emily if she ever comes back. David started coming home late every night to work dinners, and somehow always found reasons to go out, even on weekends. Sleeping next to David, who would come home reeking of alcohol and cigarettes, was unbearable for me, even if we had separate beds. Because of that, even though we originally shared a bedroom, I've been sleeping in the study ever since we moved. When it came time to send out moving announcements, I mailed letters to various places. David isn't good with that sort of thing. So I took the initiative to send letters on his behalf to his family and relatives. As for me, since my parents have passed away, I simply wrote a brief note and sent it to friends and relatives on my mother's side. I haven't been in contact with any relatives from my father's side because of my half-sister, Alicia. Alicia is my half-sister, 14 years younger than me. When I was in 7th grade, my mother passed away, and about 6 months later, my father remarried. Alicia was born to him and his new wife at the time of their marriage. Alicia was already 2 years old, so I initially thought it was a union of two families with kids. About 5 years into their marriage, my father and his new wife were involved in an accident and never returned. At their funeral, relatives from my dad's side told me that he and his new wife had been childhood friends, and everyone had always thought they would end up together. However, my mom had set them up through her boss, and my dad felt he couldn't refuse, leaving his childhood friend out in the cold. To think that behind their smiles, my dad had a child with his second wife was a huge shock to me. Every time we had a family gathering, Alicia's favorite foods were served. She had brand-name clothes, and she got the biggest room all to herself. If she said she wanted to go somewhere, they'd take her immediately. Meanwhile, I was burdened with all the chores, from preparing meals to doing laundry. I had to work part-time jobs, and all the money I earned was taken away. I also had a small storage room under the stairs, and I had to beg for even basic necessities. By the time Alicia was in elementary school, she had heard about my mom from the relatives and started looking down on me. I worked several part-time jobs to save money and finally moved out. It was impossible for me to harbor any positive feelings towards Alicia, and I never told her about my marriage or that I had a child. A few weeks after moving, I was having tea and relaxing when the doorbell rang. When I answered, a man's voice mumbled delivery, and on the screen was a person looking down. I thought maybe David had ordered something and opened the door, only to be left speechless. "Oh, Alicia, why are you here?" "Hi, sis. Long time no see. Just thought I'd drop by," Alicia said while wearing the hat I saw on the intercom. She wasn't a delivery person, but my half-sister. Without waiting for a response, she walked past me, entered the living room, and sat down on the couch. I followed her in a hurry, stood in front of her, and looked down. "I figured you wouldn't open the door if you knew it was me, so I used a recorded voice. That's just low. Geez, you're scary." I raised my voice at Alicia, and she feigned fear in an exaggerated way. However, it was clear she was just putting on a show, and the proof was that Alicia had a smirk on her face. "I came for a visit," Alicia said, speaking nonsense, getting a cold response from me. Yet she grinned and started explaining the reason for her unexpected visit. "But sis, you never even told me where you live. I got married, but my husband is always on business trips, and it's getting boring. Plus, once my belly starts getting bigger, moving around becomes a hassle, right? Everyone told me to come stay with you. Just go home. I don't even want anything to do with you." "Well, too bad. I already came here planning to stay with you." Listening to Alicia's audacious words only irked me further. Under my breath, I muttered, "Typical of a kleptomaniac's daughter." Hearing that, my anger reached its peak. "Get out. I never want to see your face again." "What's all the fuss about?" "People outside can hear you," David said. I was at a loss for words, surprised by David's unexpected return at such an odd hour. As I struggled to explain, Alicia stood up and walked over to David, intertwining her arm with his. David didn't seem to mind. In fact, he looked quite pleased. "Oh, Alicia here. Welcome, David. My sister was being mean. I thought it'd be nice to stay with you until the baby is born. But is that okay?" "Of course. I'd be thrilled if you're okay with it. You can stay as long as you want." I stood there in disbelief, silently observing the exchange between David and Alicia. The intimacy they shared seemed more like that of lovers than mere siblings-in-law. "David, what's going on?" I managed to utter, but he dismissed me, accusing me of being jealous of my cute little sister. His words left me speechless, considering I had confided in him about my family situation before our marriage. "We have a spare bed in the guest room. You can stay there," David offered casually. Alicia seized the opportunity, expressing her desire to sleep in the same room with him. Their mushy conversation gave me a headache, and as they went to the bedroom arm in arm, I couldn't shake a bad feeling. Peeking into the room after several minutes, I discovered them embracing each other, living out what felt like a dream for Alicia. The baby is thrilled too, living with Daddy," Alicia exclaimed, dropping the bombshell that David was the father. As they kissed, I watched through the crack in the door, tears streaming down my face. From that day on, they treated me like a housemaid. I complied, but silently began gathering evidence against them, contemplating divorce. One day, Alicia arrogantly demanded I leave the room, claiming she, a pregnant woman, needed space. The spiteful look on her face contradicted the gentleness usually associated with expectant mothers. Looking at David for support, he sided with Alicia, causing any lingering feelings I had for him to vanish. Still, a touch of sadness remained as David happily took Alicia's hand, sealing my decision to leave. "I'll leave tomorrow," I declared, prompting an elated David to suggest I find somewhere else to stay that night. "This is now my and Alicia's home." I subtly nodded, leaving them to enjoy their laughter while they could. Stepping outside, a grin formed on my face as I contemplated what lay ahead. That night, I checked into a hotel, making plans for the next phase. The following day, I scheduled a moving company and headed to City Hall to start anew. Excitement and thoughts of newfound freedom kept me awake, but my spirit remained high. To my surprise, upon returning home, I found the moving company already confused, as the house appeared empty. A small box with a note greeted me, containing some of my cherished belongings carelessly thrown in. Adding insult to injury, David's wedding ring lay at the bottom of the box. Anger surged within me as I discovered the house in disarray, with evidence of David and Alicia's escapades. I led the movers to pack their belongings, then found a note on the dining table announcing David and Alicia's 6-day trip abroad and requesting the house to be cleaned. The note mentioned that the divorce would be finalized upon their return. David's utter self-centeredness left me dumbfounded, but his absence made executing my plan much easier and secretly grateful that I had the movers pack all my belongings. I left David's wedding ring on the kitchen counter before departing the house. After some contemplation, I purchased a place near Emily's university, which happened to be on sale. The one-bedroom apartment was cozy, and I cherished the solitude it offered. On the day David and Alicia were set to return, my phone incessantly rang. Without checking, I knew it was them. Answering with a nonchalant hello, I was met with David's frantic voice demanding an explanation. "What the hell is going on?" he shouted. Remaining calm, I replied, "What do you mean? What's going on?" David, fuming, informed me that the house was gone. Bursting into laughter, I explained, "Well, it was my house, and if I'm not going to live there, why keep it? We were living there, weren't we? Don't worry, everything's safely stored in a storage unit. I'll text you the location and access code." David demanded I bring back the house, but I retorted that it was under my name, and the money used to build it was from my investments, not a dime from him. David seemed to recall his lack of involvement when the house was built, a fact he had conveniently forgotten. Claiming the baby to be his niece or nephew, David pleaded for me to do something about the house, as Alicia was in a tough spot. I informed him that I had known about their relationship since Alicia barged into our house. I had been gathering evidence, including recordings from a high-end baby monitor Alicia had me buy during a fit. The monitor captured everything, even in the pitch dark. Upon revealing this, David was at a loss for words. Cheerfully, I mentioned that the mailbox might have something for him. David checked it, discovering a certified mail. I explained that it was about the payment, and there was one for Alicia too. Unfazed, I insisted it was compensation for their betrayal. Ignoring his plea to talk to his lawyer, I ended the call. A barrage of calls followed, which I ignored. My old phone, used for evidence, wouldn't be an issue if left alone. After an hour of incessant calling, David seemed to give up. The attorney reached out, sounding weary. The next morning, a relative from my father's side called on my new phone, likely having obtained the number from Alicia. Expecting scolding, I recorded the call. The relative demanded an apology to Alicia, who was pregnant, and insisted on a new house as compensation. Unyielding, I refused to apologize to the woman who had an affair with my husband. I asserted that Alicia should apologize and pay compensation. When accused of being a kleptomaniac's child, I retaliated, stating that Alicia's actions were reflective of her father's betrayal. I instructed them to relay a message to Alicia to never get involved with me again, though I doubted she would have the chance. Hanging up on the babbling relatives, I felt the refreshing release of pent-up emotions. I contacted my lawyer, determined to bring Alicia and David to justice. The thirst for revenge lingered until I witnessed the dumbfounded expressions on their faces during our discussion at the lawyer's office. Alicia appeared utterly miffed, while David wore a grumpy expression, showing no remorse. Surprisingly astounded, rather than angry at their self-centered comments, I laid out divorce papers in front of them, accompanied by another set, the marriage license, offering a reduction in compensation if they signed the latter. David snatched the pen from me and signed without hesitation. Alicia, smirking, followed suit. Placing the signed documents in a folder, I gave them a big smile. "I'll submit these to the county office," I announced. Alicia, with a dumbfounded expression, tried to argue, but I revealed that the divorce was already finalized in mediation the day before. Her lack of awareness stemmed from disregarding multiple summonses. As Alicia and David processed this information, I dropped another bombshell: the possibility of David denying the father-child relationship with the unborn child. Alicia stared in shock, and David, realizing the potential consequences, looked pale. Between compensation and child support for another man's baby, I wished them luck. However, David attempted to reconcile, citing Emily's presence. Just as he changed his tune, the lawyer's office door swung open, revealing Emily. Her harsh words stunned David, frozen in shock, while Alicia, insulted, shook with rage. Emily cut ties with David, expressing her intention to live with me, referring to Alicia as that loose woman. Unable to respond, Alicia faced Emily's verbal onslaught. I delivered the final blow, revealing David's financial limitations and asserting ownership of the house and car. Alicia's plan to extract money seemed to unravel, leaving her pale and stunned. As I left with my lawyer and Emily, I left them to their newfound reality. That evening, having dinner with Emily for the first time in a while was delightful. I filed for divorce, and around the time Alicia's waiting period for remarriage had passed, David and Alicia submitted their marriage license. The witness section bore my signature, along with Alicia's ex-husband, who had shared crucial information. News circulated that David, involved in an affair with Alicia at work, got fired for misusing travel expenses for secret getaways. He now struggles with part-time jobs. Alicia, taking care of the child, faces financial difficulties after being dumped by her boyfriend. Her attempt to sabotage my family had backfired. Meanwhile, Emily enjoys college life, and I've been leading a relaxed life with my stock dividends. Surprisingly, I've developed a closer bond with Alicia's ex-husband, who affectionately calls me Catherine. Recently, he reached out for an important talk, making me feel a bit restless as I sit in front of my vanity, my face flushed like a smitten young woman.
It appears our working styles just aren't compatible. Starting tomorrow, there's no need for you to come in, I declared, feeling I had reached my breaking point. I couldn't continue working under such leadership any longer, so I made my decision on the spot. Understood. I'll tender my resignation effective immediately. Thank you for the opportunity, I replied calmly, though inside I lamented leaving a job I once cherished. As I adjusted to the hectic pace of my days, a new clerk approached me with news of a visitor. Curious, I made my way to the reception room, where I found Samantha waiting. "John, please reconsider returning to our company," Samantha implored, surprising me with her humility. Gone was the stern, demanding figure I once knew. "My name is John Baker, and I have been dedicated to our boutique couture shop in this small town for 20 years. Despite its couture label, our clientele for bespoke items has diminished, prompting us to expand our offerings to include suits, shirts, and even school uniforms to sustain our business. Despite the changing landscape, I've always cherished our shop for its strong community roots and values. However, the atmosphere shifted when our long-standing president fell ill. He was the visionary behind our establishment, but as his health declined, his granddaughter Samantha Smith, with no prior industry experience, assumed leadership. While the transition occurred smoothly, Samantha's approach to management left much to be desired. I found myself particularly singled out by her harsh scrutiny. "Samantha, how are our sales faring recently? I urge you to secure new contracts promptly," she demanded, clearly irritable. "I've been actively seeking opportunities, but it's challenging to attract clients interested in culture. The decline in demand is evident, and our traditional culture model is facing challenges," I explained, attempting to provide context. However, Samantha's response was unforgiving. "I don't want excuses. It's not a matter of impossibility, it's a matter of effort. Until you bring in new contracts, merely servicing existing clients won't suffice. I expect you to expand our client base," she retorted with a heavy sigh, leaving little room for discussion. "Don't assume you're here indefinitely. Spend more time networking outside. Don't return until you've clinched a contract," Samantha commanded, rising from her seat, her designer bag and impeccably tailored suit serving as symbols of her authority as the company's president. However, her penchant for spending work hours at spas and salons eroded the respect of her employees. "Taking a break, Miss President? We have a 3:00 p.m. meeting regarding the uniforms," I interjected, only to be met with Samantha slamming her bag onto the desk with a resounding thud. "A break? Let me make this clear, a president doesn't take breaks. It's frustrating to be lumped together with regular employees. Opportunities can arise unexpectedly, and it's crucial to maintain a visible presence. Think before you speak," she reprimanded sharply, before briskly making her exit, the glimmer of her ostentatious diamond necklace almost blinding in its brilliance. As the lunch break commenced, I hastily devoured my meal, reminiscing about the days when leisurely lunches were the norm before the previous president's departure. Since Samantha assumed control, the luxury of idle chatter and shared takeout had vanished. Instead, there was an unrelenting emphasis on performance metrics and contract acquisition, with Samantha often remarking, "If you have time for lunch, you have time to sell." It was a stark departure from the camaraderie we once shared, leaving me wistful for those bygone days. However, sentimentality must take a backseat today. Amidst my packed schedule of client visits, securing a new contract is imperative. While skipping pleasantries with established clients could potentially increase sales visits, I remain steadfast in my belief that nurturing personal connections is paramount. There's a unique joy in collaborating with trusted tailors and selecting couture pieces together, fostering a sense of trust that transcends mere transactions. It's these enduring relationships that compel customers to invest in our culture for their special occasions. Despite the pressing time constraints, I ensure to extend genuine greetings to our suppliers and loyal clientele. Visiting the home of an elderly customer who had entrusted me with her granddaughter's wedding culture, I inquire of the recent nuptials. The warmth in her recounting of the celebration and her satisfaction with our culture fills me with genuine happiness. When she entrusted me with her other granddaughter's wedding attire, it was truly a moment of joy. As the day unfolds, the dwindling time leaves little opportunity to pursue potential clients, resulting in a lack of new contracts secured. With the clock striking 2, I reluctantly begin my return to the office, knowing I must hurry to make it in time for the impending meeting. Each step feels heavier with the weight of unfulfilled expectations. Upon my return, Samantha's probing words greeted me, igniting a sense of dread. Her assumption that I must have secured a contract due to my absence from slacking off left me speechless. Samantha's presence, unusually early for once, seemed to amplify the tension in the room, threatening to unravel my composure. My hesitant response only seemed to exacerbate Samantha's displeasure as she kicked the desk, her voice escalating in frustration. "No results? You're becoming a liability to the company. Perhaps it's time you started looking for a new job. There's no shortage of skilled individuals, unlike someone in their 40s with no discernible talents." Her words stung, fueling my irritation as I reluctantly shared the modest progress I had achieved. Despite the positive feedback from a client who expressed interest in utilizing our services again, Samantha's reaction was far from encouraging. "And when will this potential sale materialize? How many items?" At what price point? Is this a one-time occurrence or a recurring agreement? Samantha's interrogation continued, her tone devoid of warmth or understanding, further deepening my frustration. Listen, you seem to confuse socializing with sales. Sales isn't complete until the product is delivered and the invoice is sent. It serves us no purpose to inflate the significance of your casual conversations and boast about them. Though I felt the urge to retort against Samantha's assertion, the reality remained that I had failed to secure any new contracts. Determined to prove her wrong, I resolved to redouble my efforts and secure a contract the following day. As I began organizing for the impending meeting, Samantha unexpectedly interjected. Change of plans. I have an appointment to attend, so let's postpone the meeting report until tomorrow, Samantha announced, already preparing to leave. Caught off guard, I couldn't help but question her decision. Wait a moment, I was under the impression we had a meeting scheduled for today. If we don't confirm and proceed with the orders now, we risk missing deadlines. Your presence as the president is crucial. Is this appointment truly unavoidable? I queried, met with an unmistakably irritated expression from Samantha. It's an important dinner engagement. I don't have time to spare on this matter, so I'm leaving now, Samantha asserted, her tone brisk as she made her way towards the exit. Just before departing, she turned back to address me. Remember, your job isn't finished after the meeting. Once the orders are placed, go out and secure at least one new contract. And don't expect any overtime pay, so give it your all, Samantha remarked with a hearty laugh before exiting, leaving behind a puzzled meeting attendee who had expected the president's presence. However, I managed to reassure them and salvage the situation. In our small-scale company, trust is paramount. This was a principle instilled by the previous president, who led by example, always attending sales meetings and diligently overseeing deliveries. It was this commitment to service that garnered trust from our community, sustaining our business thus far. Yet lately, I sensed a decline in that trust. Determined to restore it, I resolved to handle the situation with integrity and secure orders as usual. After seeing off our business partners and gaining their understanding, I immediately began preparations for further sales visits. I'll be stepping out for a while, so feel free to leave when you're ready. Thank you all for today, I announced to my colleagues, eager to take proactive steps towards rebuilding trust in our company. It was already nightfall, the workday long over, as I exchanged greetings with a few remaining colleagues before embarking on my sales rounds. The following day, I arrived at the office with renewed vigor. The previous day's cold calls had yielded promising results. I had engaged with a potential client interested in revamping their company's uniforms. Though not a major corporation, our conversation flowed smoothly, culminating in the agreement of a contract on the spot. While the initial order only encompassed summer apparel and winter sweaters, the prospect of nurturing this client relationship could lead to lucrative opportunities, including renewals and referrals to other businesses. Aware of the potential of such connections, I felt buoyant, anticipating a positive report to Samantha. However, my optimism was short-lived. Samantha, who arrived slightly late, summoned me immediately. John, don't we have a report from yesterday's meeting? And I want to hear about your subsequent activities. Certainly, I'll provide the report now, I responded, approaching Samantha with a sense of eagerness. Yet, upon reaching her, I noticed her rubbing her temples wearily. Are you alright? You seem unwell, Miss President. Just proceed, was her curt reply. A faint odor of alcohol lingered in the air, indicating she had indulged until the early hours and was now feeling the effects. Seeing Samantha in such a state left me incredulous. Despite my astonishment, I succinctly recounted the events of the previous day. We proceeded with the order as usual for this year. There was some negotiation on price, but they understood that it wouldn't change moving forward, and then... Wait a minute, they requested a discount, didn't they? And you resisted, insisting on raising prices, Samantha interjected, her bloodshot eyes fixed on me with intensity. No, that's not the case. While we ideally would adjust prices to account for inflation, given that we're offering similar products to other companies, it's challenging to implement such changes without impacting their profit margins. Unfortunately, they weren't receptive to that idea, I clarified, bracing for Samantha's reaction. Infuriated by my response, Samantha lashed out. That's precisely why they're taking advantage of us. We need to assert ourselves like they do. What's your plan? It's not about their profits. Our profitability should be the priority. Though she held the title of president, I couldn't align with Samantha's viewpoint. While assertive negotiation is crucial, prioritizing one party's profit over the other can be detrimental, particularly in intercompany transactions. Recognizing that further debate would only escalate tensions, I proceeded with my report from the previous day. We'll reassess the pricing structure moving forward. Additionally, I'm pleased to report that we secured a new contract, I announced, hoping to garner at least a modicum of approval from Samantha. Not bad. What's the projected profit margin? Samantha inquired, displaying a faint glimmer of interest. We've acquired an order for summer clothing and winter sweaters from a small-sized company with a few dozen employees. While it's not a monumental contract, it represents a promising foothold for potential future opportunities, I explained, eager to highlight the potential for growth. However, Samantha's response was disheartening. Is that all? And it's not even culture? It seems your efforts outside of regular work hours have yielded little. Truly disappointing, Samantha remarked, her words piercing through my optimism. At that moment, I felt a surge of frustration and disillusionment wash over me, reaching my breaking point. Excuse me, but it seems you misunderstand the nature of this job. It's the relationships and connections we cultivate that drive our success, not just immediate profits, I asserted firmly, challenging Samantha's narrow focus. Though taken aback by my boldness, Samantha quickly reverted to her usual haughty demeanor. Understood, it appears we're not compatible. You needn't come in from tomorrow, Samantha declared, drawing a decisive line. I had reached my breaking point. Continuing under such leadership was untenable. Understood, I resign effective today. Thank you for the opportunity, I responded without hesitation, knowing that I couldn't continue in an environment that disregarded the importance of meaningful connections. With that, the decision was made for me to leave the job I once loved. Alone in the empty room, I grappled with uncertainty about my future. Despite leaving abruptly, I had nowhere to turn. My modest salary had left me with little in savings, and the prospect of financial instability loomed large. Then, unexpectedly, a familiar name flashed across my smartphone screen, Tom Wilson. We had attended college together, sharing fond memories and occasional outings. Though our interactions had dwindled in recent years, the call from an old friend filled me with hope. Long time no see, how have you been? Tom's voice carried warmth and familiarity, offering a glimmer of comfort in my moment of uncertainty. Indeed, it's been too long. I'm doing well. You sound great too, John. Tom greeted me warmly, though his next words cast a shadow over our conversation. How's work? Knowing you, John, I'd imagine you're excelling as a capable leader with a strong support network. It's a bit complicated. I've actually been unemployed for a while now, I confessed, feeling a pang of disappointment even in Tom's sympathetic response. Despite his usual upbeat demeanor, Tom seemed momentarily at a loss for words. It's been challenging, I added, trying to lighten the mood. It must have been tough. Let's not dwell on it over the phone. How about we meet up for drinks? It's a sudden invitation, but what do you say about today? Tom proposed, and I eagerly accepted. The prospect of catching up with an old friend was a welcome distraction, and I felt a deep-seated need to confide in someone. We settled on a pub we used to frequent and agreed to meet later that day. I was taken aback, you clashing with the president and leaving the company in such a dramatic fashion. You used to avoid conflicts at all costs, always quick to apologize even when it wasn't warranted, Tom remarked, genuinely surprised by my recent upheaval. I was surprised myself. But I couldn't reconcile with the new president's approach. It's one thing not to understand the intricacies of fieldwork, but disregarding the needs of clients and partners entirely was a deal-breaker, I explained, grateful for Tom's receptive ear. Despite years of distance between us, I was comforted by the familiarity and openness of our conversation. Did you always work in sales at that company? Tom inquired, delving deeper into my professional history. Sales was certainly a big part of my role, but I also dabbled in website development and attempted to introduce new products. It was enjoyable, but unfortunately, budget constraints hindered our progress. I explained to Tom while showing him the company's website on my smartphone, proudly revealing that I had created it myself. Did you really design this? I assumed it was outsourced. It's just as professional as any other site, Tom marveled, impressed by my handiwork. The previous president emphasized the importance of a website that would appeal to younger demographics, so I dedicated myself to learning. While couture is undeniably beautiful, the industry is facing challenges. I had to think outside the box, I elaborated, recalling the efforts I had invested in the project. But with our company's size, there are limitations, Tham observed, leaning in attentively as I continued. True, but I had ideas that I wasn't able to fully realize, I confessed, seizing the opportunity to share my aspirations with Tham. The demand for everyday culture may be declining, but there's a growing need for attire for special occasions and social media appearances. By focusing on these niche markets and catering to inbound demand, I believe we can chart a successful course forward, I explained passionately, articulating my vision for the future. Indeed, I had aspirations beyond just culture. I envisioned introducing high-quality leather goods under our brand at a slightly lower price point. Offering consumers affordable yet luxurious products would not only be appreciated but could also yield substantial profit margins. We can't rely solely on thin margins to sustain our business, I explained to Tham, elaborating on my vision for diversification. Tham listened intently, his arms crossed as he contemplated my words. So, was it the lack of initial investment, or did you abandon the idea due to insufficient funds? It was a combination of both, along with the current president's strong opposition, I admitted. She argued that culture shop shouldn't stray into other ventures. I understood her desire to preserve the legacy of the previous owner's cherished culture shop without deviating from tradition. However, it's becoming increasingly difficult to resist the inevitable changes brought about by time and the declining industry. I had hoped to inject new ideas into the company, but they weren't well received. Finishing his beer in one gulp, Tham turned to me with a serious expression. John, how about joining my company? I'll offer you a fixed salary equivalent to what you were earning, plus commission on sales. It's a pretty good deal, don't you think? His eyes held a sense of determination. I was taken aback by Tham's offer to join his company. I had known he was running his own brand as a sole proprietor, primarily online without a physical store. But I never imagined he could afford to hire someone like me. When I expressed my surprise and sought confirmation, Tham chuckled and reassured me, "You underestimate me. While my main business operates online, relying on outsourcing alone isn't sustainable in the long run. It's time for expansion, and I believe bringing you on board is the right move." He leaned in, whispering the impressive turnover of his store and his monthly earnings, leaving me in shock. The amount he made in a month far exceeded my yearly income. "So, I'm looking forward to having you join us. I'll be counting on you starting next week," Tham concluded, and we agreed to formalize the contract later, sealing my employment at his company. Upon joining Tham's company, I wasted no time in making an impact. I revamped the website, making product searches easier and more intuitive. The result was a tenfold increase in page views almost immediately. Additionally, I introduced suits and leather accessories to augment the range of products, which had previously consisted mainly of t-shirts. The quality and usability of these new additions were well received, and positive word of mouth quickly translated into increased sales that outstripped those of the t-shirts. Hey, the orders just keep pouring in, but production can't keep up. Can you help us out?" Tham exclaimed, overwhelmed by the surge in demand. Offering high-quality products at affordable prices, coupled with the brand reliability he had built over time, I felt a sense of fulfillment being able to implement ideas that were previously hindered by budget constraints. As purchase notifications continued to flood in on the tablet, I realized production was nearing its limit, leaving Tham both pleased and scratching his head. "Your former company let go of a real talent. It's not just about timing or environment, it takes skill. But I appreciate the compliment," I admitted humbly, reflecting on the journey that led me to this moment of success alongside Tham. As my smartphone rang, displaying Samantha's name on the screen, I couldn't help but feel a pang of apprehension. Curiosity got the better of me, and I nervously answered the call. "Hello, John. Something terrible has occurred. Can you return? I need you back right away. Is that possible?" Samantha's voice sounded more frantic than I had ever heard it, prompting me to listen intently. "What's happened?" I inquired, my concern growing with each passing moment. "Our couture clientele has threatened to take their business elsewhere if you're not present. Additionally, our partners are specifically requesting your involvement, and the company website is experiencing ongoing issues due to a lack of updates. Can you return promptly to assist?" Even though I had parted ways with the company, I responded courteously. "I understand the urgency, but I don't believe it's appropriate for me to directly engage with clients anymore. However, I'm willing to address the website and system issues on my next day off." I didn't formally hand over that responsibility, so I accept full responsibility for any oversights, I explained calmly, attempting to offer a reasonable solution. Despite my efforts to accommodate, Samantha's response indicated dissatisfaction. What do you mean? Just come back. Considering everything the company has done for you, why are you hesitating? Samantha's tone was a mix of urgency and frustration. I was let go from the company. Are you suggesting a rehire? I questioned, trying to clarify the situation. Don't be so arrogant. I assume you're struggling financially now, right? I can offer you the same salary as before, so there's no need to worry, Samantha retorted, her tone dripping with condescension. Apologies for the interruption, Tom interjected, unable to contain his laughter. He mimed a gesture of encouragement, silently urging me to stand my ground against Samantha's presumptuous offer. Do you have any idea about my current salary? I likely earn in a month what you make in a year. In fact, my current salary could surpass the annual revenue of my former company within just a few months, I calmly asserted, making it clear that financial incentives weren't a compelling reason for me to return to my old workplace. Despite cherishing memories from my previous job, I found fulfillment in my current position and had no desire to work under such leadership again. After politely bidding Samantha farewell, I ended the call. Since joining Tom's company, our operations had grown exponentially. With my contributions, we forged partnerships with outsourcing firms and attracted new talent, leading to rapid expansion. Witnessing the success of products I helped develop being embraced by consumers and shared across social media, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Amidst my hectic schedule, I was interrupted by a message from a newly hired clerk informing me of a visitor. Intrigued, I made my way to the reception room, where I was surprised to find Samantha waiting. "John, I'm begging you, please reconsider coming back to our company," Samantha pleaded, her desperation palpable. Despite her earnest plea, I remained resolute in my decision to move forward and declined her offer. What happened? Let's hear the details first, I urged Samantha, guiding her to sit on the sofa. She appeared visibly worn out, a stark contrast to her once vibrant demeanor. Since you left, we've been hemorrhaging customers. It's not just individual clients. Even our corporate partnerships are crumbling. I can barely cover the employees' salaries anymore. If things continue like this, we'll be forced to shut down the shop. I need your help, Samantha confessed, her voice tinged with desperation. While I couldn't help but sympathize with Samantha's plight, it was clear that she had brought this situation upon herself by prioritizing profits over communication and relationship building. It was inevitable that partners would abandon ship if they felt neglected. I'd like to assist, but I'm currently overwhelmed with responsibilities at my current company. I'm sorry, but I can't offer you immediate help, I responded, regret lacing my words. In a last-ditch effort, Samantha implored me for assistance, clutching at straws. Samantha, it's time to gather your strength. Have you exhausted all possible avenues? Now is the moment to take decisive action. Rebuilding trust requires face-to-face interactions, understanding their needs, and showing empathy for their concerns. Please dedicate yourself to what you've neglected until now. It's the only way forward, I advised firmly yet empathetically. With newfound resolve, Samantha wiped away her tears and nodded resolutely. You're right. I've made mistakes, but I'll start rectifying them from this moment onward. As I reflected on Samantha's plea for help, I couldn't shake the feeling of powerlessness that gripped me. Despite my genuine desire to assist, the prospect of starting anew seemed daunting and nearly impossible. Thoughts of the predecessor to whom I owed so much weighed heavily on my mind. I was determined to prevent the beloved company from succumbing to bankruptcy, but amidst the demands of my current responsibilities, I struggled to conceive of any actionable solutions. Frustrated, I bit my lip, grappling with the enormity of the situation. Several years had passed since I joined Tom's company, and during that time, our growth had been exponential. With each expansion came an increase in the number of companies we engaged with. John, what do you think of this? I believe it would be perfect for an important dinner date, Samantha proposed eagerly, seeking my opinion. It's fantastic. Exactly as I envisioned, and the fabric is exquisite, I replied, genuinely impressed. The response to our announcement on social media was overwhelmingly positive, culminating in a significant order placement. We'd like to place an order worth $50,000 with your company for now. Thank you so much, the client expressed their gratitude. Following this successful transaction, the performance of Tom's company soared to new heights, prompting the establishment of new departments and the hiring of additional staff. I'd played a pivotal role in developing hit products, particularly in the suit department. By infusing culture designs and fabrics as accents into our suits, we garnered praise not only from domestic customers but also from international clientele, expanding our market rapidly. The challenge of securing a steady supply of quality fabric and forging connections with culture-focused companies led me to reach out to Samantha for assistance. To my surprise, Samantha not only sourced the fabric we needed, but also provided invaluable consumer-oriented suggestions, resulting in a product that exceeded our initial expectations. I truly appreciate your help, Samantha. Thank you. I expressed my gratitude, noting the slight blush that colored Samantha's cheeks. Have my efforts made a difference? I've learned so much from you, John. Despite holding the title of president, I realize now how misguided I was in my approach. I was consumed by a desire to assert my authority in an industry I knew little about. It was a grave mistake. But thanks to your guidance, I've learned the importance of fostering relationships with employees and partners, ultimately earning the trust of the community. I'm confident that my company will continue to thrive, Samantha reflected sincerely. Meanwhile, Tom, who had always been immersed in his work, found himself embarking on a new chapter as he tied the knot with a significant partner. As I witnessed Tom's happiness on his wedding day, I couldn't help but share in the joy as if it were my own. Congratulations, you're absolutely radiant, I exclaimed, admiring Tom's appearance. Well, it's all thanks to the impeccable design of this suit. I just hope I can live up to its elegance, Tom replied with a chuckle. Sharing in the laughter, we exchanged heartfelt wishes, savoring a moment of joy that illuminated the routine of our everyday lives and transformed a fleeting occasion into a cherished memory. It was a reminder of the transformative power of clothing, and I felt privileged to be part of an industry that wielded such influence. With renewed determination, I resolved to continue crafting work that brought beauty and joy to the lives of others.
I am Chelsea. A few weeks ago, my father, who had been battling illness, passed away. Regret lingers within me as I wish I could have shared with him the joy of meeting his grandchildren. These thoughts escaped my lips accompanied by a heavy sigh. I got married 5 years ago at the age of 25, and during the ceremony, my father and I made a pact. I promised to inform him first when I got pregnant. Sadly, that promise remained unfulfilled. My only regret about my father centers around this unkept promise. His illness had been discovered a year ago, and since then, I devoted myself to doing everything I could for him. Regular visits to my parents' home and the hospital with my mother became a routine. I increased the frequency of phone calls and video chats, exhaustively exploring every avenue to support him. Despite my efforts, a lingering doubt persists. Could I have done more? As I mull over these thoughts, my mother, sitting beside me, reassures me, "You did well, Chelsea. Your father would be satisfied." Just then, my sister Portia returns, accompanied by the family lawyer. The mid-40s man hands me his business card, introducing himself as Samuel, the attorney. My mother guides Samuel to a seat, and as soon as he settles in, my sister blurts out, "I heard from this lawyer that Dad left quite an inheritance." I quickly clarify, "It's not all for you, Portia." Her expression sours, and we exchange glares. Our strained relationship, exacerbated by my sister's distant attitude since our father's illness was discovered, hangs heavily in the room. I try to address the tension, stating, "I may have said it wrong, worried about him, but you don't have to be so stubborn." She retorts, "I'm not being stubborn. I live in the city. It's not easy to come to the countryside." Our argument reveals deeper issues, and the lawyer intervenes, urging us to calm down. Apologies are exchanged, but the lawyer redirects the focus, stating, "As I mentioned on the phone, I have your father's will." My mother inquires when this occurred, and Samuel responds, "A few weeks before he passed away, he contacted me." The lawyer had visited the hospital, where my father, with his primary physician present, had finalized his will. It had been arranged for the physician to inform the lawyer upon my father's passing. Now, with a white envelope in hand, the lawyer places the will in front of us, confirming, "This is the will, undoubtedly in your father's handwriting." I murmured as I verified the characters on the envelope. My sister Portia appeared somewhat irritable, but she dismissed it, saying, "Never mind, just tell us what's in it." "I'm busy. You know that very well," she added, addressing the lawyer with a wry smile. With that, he opened the envelope, revealing a single sheet of paper. The contents outlined that, aside from the house and land, my father's inheritance included some savings and a storage shed. While we were aware of the house and land, the mention of a storage shed puzzled me. As I contemplated this, my sister, visibly annoyed, interjected, "Wait a minute. You didn't mention the farm." The lawyer acknowledged the oversight and explained, "Yes, the farm your dad used to work on as a hobby." He recounted how, after turning 50, my father decided to close his company in the next town and focus on farming near our home. Despite initial objections from my sister, who opposed the decision during her college years, my father persisted, finding joy in the physical activity of farming. Now, my sister insisted that the farm should be part of the inheritance. The lawyer, reviewing the documents, quickly addressed this concern, revealing that the farm was rented land. My sister expressed disappointment, realizing we didn't own the expansive piece of land as she had thought. The conversation then turned to dividing the inheritance. The lawyer suggested giving the house and land to the wife, my mother, leaving the rest to be divided between my sister and me. The savings and storage shed were up for distribution. My sister eagerly claimed the savings, valuing at about $100,000, declaring triumphantly, "I'll take the cash." However, I objected, emphasizing my position as the oldest daughter. I proposed that she could have the storage shed, questioning its significance. Despite my objections, my sister was adamant about her claim to the cash. The lawyer clarified that the storage shed was a small building next to the phone, approximately 65 square feet, resembling the size of a small bedroom. He presented photos of the shed, revealing its dilapidated exterior and basic contents, consisting mainly of ordinary tools like hoses, scissors, and shovels. The realization dawned that the shed held little monetary value. "I don't want it," my sister grimaced. I painted the photos too. It was all very ordinary. These are sentimental items, but they won't bring in money. As I pondered this, my sister reluctantly agreed, saying, "Fine, I'll take the cash. You can have that dirty shed." However, I found it unfair. "Hold on, that's not fair. You agreed to the vegetable farming. What are you complaining about now?" My sister countered, making it difficult to argue. Still, I couldn't let her take all of Dad's inheritance without a fight. My sister pressed me, asking if we were good. My mother chimed in, saying, "As long as Portia won't complain later, I have no objections." Reluctantly, I nodded, and the division was settled. My sister grinned, and feeling uneasy. I immediately objected, saying, "Well, I'm not satisfied." "Give it up. You're so greedy," my sister retorted. Her words left me speechless, and I couldn't deny that family was more important than money. My sister abruptly ended the conversation, and in the end, my mother got the house and land. My sister got Dad's savings, and all that was left for me was the dirty shed. My sister, laughing loudly, signed a document promising not to complain about the inheritance division. Filled with complaints, I couldn't help but vent to my mother. "Mom, why didn't you help me?" My mother replied, "I did help you. I made sure you got the shed." Unhappy about inheriting the shed, I puffed out my cheeks in response. The next day, armed with the shed key from the lawyer, I headed to the shed near the field, a 10-minute walk from home along a deserted rural road. Finally, reaching the empty field, I opened the dusty shed and began looking around for something sentimental from Dad. Yet, all I found were tools and nothing special. Disheartened, I considered taking what was inside when I noticed something odd. The shed seemed smaller on the inside. Puzzled, I walked around to the back and gasped. There was another door. This second entrance wasn't visible from the inside, creating a mysterious space accessible only from the back. Excitement surged through me as I thought, this must be Dad's surprise. Dad loved surprises. Even on birthdays, memories flooded back and tearing up. I returned inside, searching for the back door key. After finding 2 hidden keys in the handle of a shovel, I tried one in the door at the back. With a click, it opened, revealing a cramped space with a large safe. I wondered, is this from Dad's company? I recognized the safe. It was the same one I saw in the corner of his office when I was a child. Nostalgic, I hugged the safe. This was a true memory of my father, and I felt fulfilled. This alone made the inheritance worthwhile. However, knowing Dad, this couldn't be the end. There had to be more surprises. There's got to be more surprises, I muttered as I inserted the second key into the safe. With a slightly rusty sound, the safe opened. What? No way. The moment I saw the contents, I was stunned. Inside was an unexpected inheritance. Overwhelmed, I locked the safe and rushed to my mother. After explaining the situation to her, I called my husband, and with his help, we moved the safe from my parents' house. Then it hit me, the contents of the safe were undoubtedly Dad's. However, if it's part of my inheritance, including the shed, I might have to pay inheritance tax. Better get this checked out thoroughly, I thought. The valuable contents of the safe prompted me to consult the lawyer. According to him, for inheritance tax matters, it's better to consult a certified public accountant. So I got a referral to an accountant from a friend and left all the complicated matters to them. The year passed in this way, and just when I thought things had finally settled down, my sister showed up near my home. What brings you here all of a sudden? I asked. Well, I had some business at our parents' house, so I stopped by, yeah, something like that. My sister replied, her behavior appearing strange. No matter how you looked at it, even if my home was close to our parents', it was still a 20-minute drive. We weren't the kind of sisters who would casually visit, especially after the tension of our dad's inheritance. I couldn't shake off my suspicion as I looked at her. My sister, acting a bit nervous, asked, "Can I come in?" "Sure, but what's the matter?" I inquired. "I have something to talk about," my sister said, forcing a smile. Reluctantly, I let her into the house. After serving some coffee, she started to fidget, and then began to speak. "So, did you win the lottery or something?" she asked. "What? No, I didn't," I replied. "Then did your husband get a bonus?" she questioned, puzzled. "I never buy lottery tickets because I'm not interested. My husband, who's a salaried worker, does get a holiday bonus, but it's not that time of year," I explained. Confused, I asked her directly, "Hey, what are you talking about?" Suddenly, my sister got angry. "What are you making fun of me?" "No. What are you talking about?" she snapped. "Money. Money, you have it, don't you? Money." My sister spoke excitedly. It was a story from a few days ago. Living in the city, my sister had run into our aunt by chance, and the woman started the conversation like this. "I know how hard it's been for you since you lost your father. Are you doing okay?" "Yes, well, I visited him many times when he was sick. Thank you. But you must be relieved, right? Getting such a big thank you gift." "Thank you gift?" "Yes, your sister sent me a $500 gift card as a thank you for visiting him." What caught my sister's attention was the gift card. Hearing that I had sent it, she was convinced I had come into some extra money. "You got a windfall, didn't you? Just admit it." My sister interrogated me. "Ah, that's what this is about," I sighed. My sister didn't like my attitude and yelled, "What's with that attitude? Are you mocking me?" "No, it was a thank you gift." "So, where'd you get the money for it?" "That's what I want to know." "From the inheritance, remember?" I replied. "So, I sent thank you gifts to relatives who had helped us," I began, and upon hearing this, my sister frowned. "All you got was that dirty shed," she remarked. "Yes, that's true, but you can't sell that for money." However, there was a safe inside it, and that's where the real inheritance was. A safe? A real inheritance? I carefully explained to her about the watches in the safe, all valuable items collected by my father as a hobby during his lifetime. However, I didn't know their exact value. On the other hand, the remaining savings were about $100,000. Considering he was a business owner who could retire early, that amount seemed small, leading me to think he might have invested a lot in those watches. If they're valuable, you'll have to pay inheritance tax, my mother had said after seeing the contents of the safe. What should I do, Mom? When I asked, my mother thought for a moment and advised, things like this always come out. You should declare it properly. How? Well, let's ask that lawyer we spoke to recently. So I consulted the lawyer again, and I was told that if you inherit valuables, the inheritance tax is determined by their value. At that time, I was also told that a certified public accountant could handle it for me. As a result, it was found that the watches alone were worth at least $500,000. With watches this valuable, you'll have to pay inheritance tax. How should I pay it? I asked. The lawyer suggested, how about keeping the ones you're emotionally attached to and selling the rest? Certainly, it didn't make sense to me, who didn't know the value, to hold on to such expensive watches. I'd rather someone who understands their worth have them. With that thought, I sold some of the watches, used the money from the sale to pay the inheritance tax, and sent thank you gifts to the relatives who had helped us. Those thank you gifts were the gift cards my sister was talking about. By the way, what I kept were items like the pocket watch my father often wore. I showed my sister the pocket watch as I told her this story. This one isn't expensive, but it holds the most memories for me. However, my sister frowned upon hearing my story. What? You don't have any left? She questioned. No, there are still some in the safe. Where's the safe? I explained, it's at Mom's. The safe is too big for this house. It's the one Dad used at his company. My sister looked away, seeming deep in thought. I felt uneasy seeing her like this, but right after that, she stood up and said, I'm leaving. Now that I know where the money came from, and left. Considering how money-minded my sister is, I thought she might demand some of the money from the watch sales. I was relieved she left without making a fuss. However, in my relief, I forgot the unease I had felt earlier. My sister isn't that understanding, and I had forgotten that. I was reminded of this late that night when I got a call from my mother. Chelsea, it's urgent. Come over right away. What happened, Mom? It's just really bad, my mother said, frantic and unclear. My husband and I rushed to my mother's house, and as we approached, we noticed something strange. The area around my parents' house was lit up in red. What's going on? The reason became clear as we got closer. Several police cars were parked outside my parents' house. I navigated through the crowd and called out to my mother. What happened, Mom? According to her, it was after 9 p.m., and feeling tired, she had gone to bed already. Soon after, she heard strange noises, sounds like someone searching for something coming from beyond the door. Oh, it's a burglar, my mother instantly thought. However, she was the only one in the house, feeling helpless. She decided to escape through the window. Looking back, she saw the light of a flashlight moving inside the house. This is definitely a burglar, she was convinced. Running to the neighbor's house, she urgently said, Help. There's a burglar. Hearing this, the neighbor immediately came out. They too saw the swinging light my mother was pointing at and called the police, thinking it was a burglar. However, it wasn't a burglar at all. It was my sister who had sneaked into the house to rummage through the safe after hearing my story. Neither my mother nor the neighbor had any way of knowing this. Soon, the police arrived, and naturally, my sister was shocked. Realizing she was in trouble, she tried to make a quick escape. Of course, it's her own family home, so there's no need to run. Yet, in her panic, my sister thought she had to escape. In her rush, she bumped into the open door of the safe. Just then, the already unstable safe toppled over, falling right onto her as she tried to flee. So, Portia got trapped under it. Yes, that's what happened. Is she okay? I asked. She was taken to the hospital by ambulance, but she keeps saying her leg hurts. What on earth was she thinking? I was truly dumbfounded. Afterward, my mother and I apologized to the police officers who had come to help, feeling bad for calling so late. I also phoned my sister's husband. Wait, you're saying Portia broke into her own family home and got injured? He questioned. Yes, that's correct. What is Portia doing? She doesn't even do housework. I'm really sorry about my sister. That's it. I'm filing for divorce. Divorce? Actually, according to my sister's husband, she had racked up a considerable amount of debt. Apparently, she had been spending a lot on brand name items, and he had just found out. They had a huge fight, and in the end, my sister stormed out of the house, saying, I'll borrow from Mom and pay it back. Turns out she had already used the $100,000 she inherited to pay off her debts. Still short, she came to me to scrounge for more money. Learning about the contents of the safe led to her actions, which in turn led to this whole mess. No wonder her husband was furious. In the end, my sister, who had fractured her leg, was hospitalized. Her husband came to the hospital and started talking about divorce. Naturally, my sister made a scene. I'm not getting a divorce. Absolutely not. But it was too late. Her husband had brought the divorce papers. Seeing them, she had no choice but to sign. Now she's lying in her hospital bed stunned. There's a part-time job magazine next to her, so she's probably planning to start working part-time to pay off her debts. That would be a relief for me. As for me, I decided to move back to my parents' home after all the commotion. Of course, I'm worried about my mother, but there's another reason. I found out I'm pregnant. My husband and I talked it over and decided to move back home and have my mother help us with the children and childcare. I wish I could have told my father about the pregnancy while he was alive, but I'm sure he would be happy for us. So I'm looking forward to giving birth to a healthy baby.
Since childhood, I harbored a deep resentment toward my stunning younger sister. She always seemed to covet everything that was mine. I was constantly told, "You're the older sister. You should be patient." And despite following that advice, she ended up taking my husband away from me. To make matters worse, I was pregnant at the time. Now, after all she's done, she has the audacity to demand a grand celebration for herself. It's shocking and brazen, but I'm no longer alone. As a single mother, life has been incredibly challenging, but I've found my own strength and support. "Shall I lend you my husband?" she taunts, but honestly, I'm doing just fine on my own. My name is Taylor. At 29, I work as a librarian, with my jet black hair pulled back, a face rarely touched by makeup, and thick sense glasses perched on my nose. My freckles are my unique charm, though they're often overshadowed by my understated look. I'm simply an ordinary yet remarkable woman. In stark contrast, my younger sister Yasmin, just a year younger than me, is slender with fair skin, her beautifully curled hair always styled to perfection. With her expertly applied makeup and dazzling smile, she greets everyone with a charismatic American flair. It's hard to believe she comes from the same parents as me, given how strikingly beautiful and charming she is. Our parents showered her with adoration, the beauty who was loved by everyone. The disparity in the affection we received was glaring, and I found myself always in the background, yearning for their attention. Determined to make a difference despite my appearance, I threw myself into everything with relentless dedication. I poured my heart into my studies, convinced that while I couldn't change how I looked, I could transform my future through hard work. As a shy student with few friends, I spent my free time studying at home. And on weekends, while my classmates enjoyed their time outside, I was confined to my room, absorbed in my books. My relentless focus on academics paid off, and I earned a place at a prestigious, nationally renowned school. I hoped that Yasmin's disinterest in academics would finally give me a break from our constant competition. But to my utter disbelief, the following year, she was accepted into the same prestigious school. You got into the same school as Taylor. You must have worked so hard. Not only are you beautiful, but you're smart too. Taylor barely made it in, especially with all the money spent on the tours. Dad, don't say that. I just happened to study what was on the exam, that's all. My sister boasted with a smile directed at me. I was frozen, overwhelmed with a mix of joy and frustration. The thought of attending school with my sister again should have been exciting. But instead, I felt a deep sense of frustration and inadequacy. Wishing I could vanish, I fled to my room and slammed the door behind me, overhearing my parents' exasperated comments. On the day of my sister's acceptance announcement, I was bedridden with a fever, feeling utterly defeated. It was a crushing blow. After working so hard to earn my place at this school, I had hoped to finally escape the endless comparisons with my sister. It felt as though fate was unjust. Yasmin seemed to excel at everything effortlessly, always topping the grades and showcasing talents I couldn't match. I know that being negative and envious isn't productive, but it's difficult to stay positive in situations like this. No one seemed to understand what I'm going through, so I find myself burying my head in my pillow, silently crying out of frustration. I can't help but feel a deep-seated resentment toward Yasmin. Since my beautiful and charming younger sister started high school, she quickly became the center of attention, with even rumors swirling about her potential modeling career. My own high school life, once filled with its own moments, took a turn for the worse as I faced teasing from the boys in my class. Yasmin, isn't your little sister the one in the first year? You two don't look anything alike. Give me a break. I'm always being compared to my sister, I'd retort, though those days felt like an endless struggle. I began to withdraw from others, feeling like I was living through a personal hell. As a naturally shy person, I isolated myself further, speaking only minimally in class and losing myself in my beloved books. Even when there were opportunities to connect with boys I had feelings for, I never had the courage to approach them. Meanwhile, my striking sister seemed to have an uncanny knack for navigating those social situations with ease, almost like a hawk spotting its prey. Big sis, you're interested in that boy from the news club, aren't you? I was taken aback by her keen observation. I turned to her, meeting her sweet smile with a mix of annoyance and resignation. Her response was predictable. You might want to reconsider. I dated him for a while, but it was so dull. I broke up with him quickly. My sister had a habit of belittling anyone I had even a hint of interest in, always swooping in to date and then discard them. Her string of boyfriends seemed endless, yet no bad rumors ever followed her, likely because her charm and looks kept men enchanted despite her fickleness. If only I had her appearance, I could live more genuinely without causing hurt. Life felt so unfair. After graduating from high school, I finally enjoyed a period of peace, despite my sister following me to the same university. Fortunately, the campus was so large that our paths rarely crossed. Grateful for the chance to live independently, I took up our parents' offer and chose to attend a prestigious university. This was my opportunity to step out of my sister's shadow and embrace a new chapter in my life. At university, I began dating a boy from my club, who would later become my first husband, Harry. I earned my librarian's qualification and started working at a library after graduation, while Harry secured a job at his dream company. Our professional lives were thriving, and after some time of marriage, I became pregnant with a girl. Life was calm and fulfilling, and I believed it would continue smoothly. However, my sister's return began to disrupt our peaceful life. After facing difficulties at her job in Chicago, she resigned and came back home, unsettling the routine we had built. Big sis, I'm back again, Yasmin would announce as she frequently dropped by our house for dinner. I wondered why she couldn't just eat at home, but she insisted on having homemade food. It turned out that our mother, who usually does the cooking, had hurt her back and was now relying on ready meals and takeout. Whenever Yasmin visits, the dinner table seems to light up. Harry, who normally avoids cooking and complains even when I suffer from morning sickness, becomes surprisingly enthusiastic in the kitchen whenever Yasmin is around. When I buy ready meals, Harry's cooking seems to taste even better. Yasmin, with her usual charm, would often comment, "I wish I could marry someone like him," while sweetly touching him, who seemed to be captivated by her attention. Her seductive nature was as evident as ever, and I couldn't believe she would be so bold as to flirt with someone else's husband. As my pregnancy progressed and my belly grew, My naive hope that Harry would remain supportive was quickly dashed. Instead, he began to distance himself from home. One day, after returning from a business trip, he delivered shocking news. Yasmin was by his side. "I'm sorry, but I want a divorce. I want to build a new future with Yasmin," Harry said. "What? You're saying this when we're about to have a baby?" I was stunned, and our views naturally clashed. Despite my protests, he insisted he had found true love and was moved by my words. Turning to my sister in disbelief, I asked, "Why him? Harry isn't particularly handsome, nor does he have an extraordinary income." "Well, married men seem stable," Yasmin replied nonchalantly. "I became interested in your husband, and before I knew it, we were drawn to each other. Attracted to each other. Do you realize you're taking the father away from me and our baby?" I could no longer ignore my sister's betrayal. This was beyond forgiveness. "It's my fault, not Yasmin's," Harry said defensively, standing by my sister, who showed no remorse. My anger quickly turned to resignation. In a state of despair, I packed a few belongings and left to inform my parents. They were appalled by the situation. Despite their past favoritism toward my sister, they insisted I stay with them until I could return to work after the birth. The divorce from Harry was finalized without complications, and the following month, I welcomed my daughter into the world. 3 years had passed, and I was fortunate to remarry. Since divorcing Harry, my 3-year-old daughter, Amy, has bonded well with my new husband, and we've built a happy life together. Then, out of the blue, I received a call from my sister. "Hello, big sis. How are you? I actually have a baby now. I decided it would be easier to raise a child close to our parents, so I've moved back. Let's catch up soon." For 3 years, there had been no contact from her, neither with me nor with our parents. Now, she was reaching out as if nothing had happened, chatting cheerfully and offering no apologies. I was at a loss for words, surprised by her sudden and casual reappearance. Of course, prepare lots of gifts. Oh, and ask Mom and Dad to forgive me. It's been 3 years. They can't still be angry, she said abruptly before ending the call. To make matters worse, I later received a text from her that read, "I'll lend you my husband if you need." Since I've been estranged from my sister, I haven't mentioned my remarriage to her. She seems to think I'm still a single mother. As I sighed in frustration, my husband, Ted, came home after finishing work. He's aware of how my sister had taken my previous husband from me. When I told him that my sister was coming to the neighborhood, claiming it was to celebrate her baby's birth, he laughed in surprise. "Your sister really has some nerve. If it were me, I'd be too guilty to show my face," Ted said with a hint of sarcasm, gently holding me from behind. "She's always been like that, beautiful and getting away with everything. I've resented her many times, and the jealousy has never truly faded. It feels like the world really does favor those who are beautiful." Sensing my frustration, Ted offered a reassuring smile. "Beauty is subjective, right? You once said an actor was handsome, but not everyone agrees. Your sister might be considered beautiful, but she's not my type. However, people who get to know her often find themselves charmed by her." "I see. Then shall we go and greet her together?" Ted suggested. "What?" I exclaimed in surprise, and Ted laughed heartily. "There's nothing for you to worry about. The idea that I could be swayed by your sister is unthinkable. I'd even bet on it. Besides, if we talk things through and establish clear boundaries, it might actually work in your favor," he said, and his words struck a chord with me. He was right. I was tired of living in fear of my sister. Determined to clear my heart and confront the situation head-on, I resolved to meet her in person. On the appointed day, I arrived at the flat where my sister and her family lived. Ted was going to be a bit late due to work commitments. "Welcome, big sis," Yasmin greeted me with a bright smile. My ex-husband Harry was also there, looking somewhat awkward. In the room, a tiny baby slept softly in a crib. "Isn't he adorable? This child is proof of the love between Harry and me," she said nonchalantly, as if taking my daughter's father from me was of no consequence. Yasmin continued to boast about her happiness and how exceptional her child was. As usual, interacting with her was exhausting. Just being in the same space made me feel tense. "By the way, big sis, where's your gift? Oh, did you forget to bring one?" "I suppose that's to be expected from a single mother with limited income," Yasmin sneered. Just then, I received a message from Ted. "Actually, I'm not a single mother anymore. I was fortunate to remarry. My husband wanted to meet you and has arrived. He's even brought a gift. Should I invite him in? Really? I'm curious to meet your new husband, Yasmin said with genuine interest. She opened the front door, only to freeze when she saw Ted standing there. Taylor, sorry to keep you waiting. I got delayed picking up a gift and also had to fetch Amy from kindergarten, Ted said with a cheerful smile. Yasmin's face turned crimson as she softly muttered, Ted, is that you? Yes, that's right, I said. My current husband, Ted, was a classmate from high school. He was academically brilliant, handsome, and quite wealthy, coming from a prominent landowning family. Ted had always stood out in our class. We reconnected at a high school reunion, and after my separation from my previous husband, he pursued me with determination. My sister, who was also in high school at the time, had once tried to make a move on him, but it didn't work out. I can't believe Ted is now my brother-in-law. There's so much I want to catch up on. Can I have your number? Yasmin asked, her voice dripping with overly sweet charm. She acted without restraint next to Ted, despite her own husband, Harry, being present. Ted let out a deep sigh of annoyance. You haven't changed at all. Even if you look good on the outside, I can't stand a bothersome and frivolous woman like you. You're worlds apart from Taylor, Ted said sharply, directing a look of disgust at my sister as he handed over the present. The baby gift he chose was from a popular brand. It was striking how he, of all people, could treat my sister, who was often adored by everyone, with such coldness. I felt he might be the only one who truly values me over her. We're here today not just to offer our congratulations, but also to request that you stay away from my wife in the future. It seems Taylor has been quite stressed because of you, Ted said clearly. I felt a weight lift from my heart. Meanwhile, Harry tried to interact with his daughter Amy after a long time, but Amy rejected him and clung tightly to Ted. Taylor and Amy are my precious family, so please refrain from causing any more trouble, Ted said firmly. And just as a side note, Yasmin's behavior is rather inappropriate. It would be good to observe social etiquette. He then took my hand and our daughters, signaling it was time to leave. Wait just a minute, Taylor, Amy, Harry pleaded desperately. Yasmin, confronted with our indifferent response, turned pale. Ignoring them, we left my sister's flat. I later heard from my parents that Yasmin had decided to divorce Harry. It seems her remarriage to someone like Ted had really unsettled her. She compared Harry to Ted in terms of appearance, personality, and income, which led to a major argument. Yasmin returned home and made a flippant apology, but she still attempted to meet with Ted. It's clear she's clinging to some hope, but it's futile, as Ted has made it clear he dislikes women like her. On my husband's advice, I've completely severed all contact with my sister. After changing jobs, she had an affair with a married supervisor, which was discovered by his wife. Now my sister is being sued by the supervisor's wife. Despite her ongoing allure, it's clear that some parts of her remain unchanged. I can laugh off the stories about her because I'm deeply content with my own family. My husband and daughter bring me immense joy. Currently, I'm pregnant with our second child. My husband and daughter are eagerly anticipating the arrival of our new family member. My husband finds solace in gently rubbing my belly and often expresses how at peace he feels. We're all excited for our future as a family of 4. While physical beauty can influence one's path in life, relying solely on looks is undeniably challenging. I'm focused on personal growth and moving forward without comparing myself to others.